across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. Loads to get through this afternoon, as you are now fully aware, unless you've been hiding under a ton of rocks. Nigel Farage resigned yesterday as the MP for Clacton, forcing a by-election, but every major party has now refused to stand against him, leaving only Count Binface as the confirmed opponent. When you say it out loud, it just gives you a little kind of window on the state of our politics, right? Nigel versus Count Binface. What a battle. Details to come. We are asking the question, has your trust in politics completely broken down? Lots of reasons why you might want to get involved in that. Also this afternoon, a new poll reveals that 61% of Brits believe the social contract is broken and distrust of politicians has never been higher. It's an interesting and a damning assertion of where we are at in the kind. If you want to look at it as a political cycle, I'd like to think it's a cycle, and we can cycle and backpedal out of it at some point. But that's where we're at the moment. And the OBR has warned that Britain's public finances are on an unsustainable path, tell us something we didn't know, requiring £120 billion in tax rises or spending cuts to stabilise debt. A stark warning that any deviation by Burnham from Reeves's borrowing plans could bring forward a full debt crisis to as early as the 2030s. We are in trouble. There are potentially ways out of this, but we need a brave politician. And do you know what? That last story kind of answers the first story in many respects. You know what happened, so let's have a reminder of how it all started yesterday afternoon.
I've thought about it hard, and I've decided today I will resign as a Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea, thereby forcing a by-election, which would happen, I hope, in short order. No, I've decided that the people of Clacton should be the judges of my actions. This will be a people versus the establishment by-election. It's a chance to stick two fingers up to the entire establishment, to frankly tell them where to go.
There it is. That last point really does resonate. Nigel Farage has now resigned. He's no longer an MP, only to ask the people of Clacton to send him straight back again. It's a move that only Farage could dream up. Is it political genius? Is it political theatre? Maybe it's a little bit of both, but it does hammer home a fundamental point. His arguments are clear. This is not about declarations, donations or parliamentary investigations. He's turning this into a battle between himself and what he calls the establishment, Westminster, the media, political classes. If he wins convincingly, he'll claim the public have delivered their verdict long before any committee does. He will argue that's what really matters. It's a clever attempt to change the conversation. Let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister said in response.
This is a desperate stunt from Nigel Farage, and it's obvious why he's doing it. He is up to his neck in sleaze. Politics should be about improving the lives of millions of people, not about personal gain, not about hiding dodgy donations, and I think the public will see this for exactly what it is.
Now, do you have a bit of sympathy with Nigel Farage on this? I mean, the scrutiny, let's be honest, has been relentless. And when politicians' families become part of the story, you can understand why somebody would have the hump and feel that they are under some kind of siege. Of course, Nigel Farage is not alone in that. He's not unique. Boris Johnson, Keir Starmer himself, Angela Rayner even. Remember that one went on forever, it seemed, about her rental, her housing and her financial situations. They've all endured some pretty forensic media attention, hostile headlines and deeply personal criticism. That's the unpleasant reality of modern politics. However unfair it may sometimes feel, that is the reality of modern politics. Opposition parties, however, as regards this latest by-election, are having none of it. Here's Kemi Badenoch.
Nigel Farage is having a hissy fit because the first time he's actually having to deal with some real scrutiny. We will be standing a candidate in the real by-election because no one is above Parliament. What this by-election is a gimmick. This is him wanting to make everything about himself rather than his offer to the country.
Now, the real question, of course, is whether this gamble reignites Nigel Farage's momentum. If he wins comfortably, he'll claim he's defeated the establishment. If he stumbles, the narrative changes overnight, of course. Either way, he has succeeded, I would argue, already. Everyone is talking about Nigel Farage again. And if there's one political skill he's never lost, it's making himself the story. In that sense, this is a genius move. People who don't like Nigel Farage and never going to vote for him will not be swayed or changed on this. But those that have sat on the fence may well be. This is a clever move, whatever way you want to slice it and whatever you think about the other issues of donations and the like. I think the wider question, and as I mentioned, we'll come on to the other story about the kind of social contract being broken between us and those political masters that we look at in Westminster. Has your trust in politics completely broken down? Your assessment of Mr Farage and this latest turn, this huge turn and twist in recent events in not just Parliament, but in the life of Nigel Farage and in the tenure of his leadership of the head of Reform UK. I think I just about said that in a coherent sentence. The only person that would have clocked my mechanics working there was Chloe Dobbs, who's with us now. How are you, Chloe?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
Good, yeah, good. Lots to get through here. I mean, we'll come on to the social contract issue in just a second. Your assessment then, you're a Reform person, voter, supporter, whatever way you want to look at it. What did you make of yesterday?
I'm a supporter, but I'm not a spokesperson, so I will criticise them where I think that criticism is due. And I do think that Nigel Farage has got himself into quite a bit of bother with these various stories coming out, not just the £5 million donation, but the news that we've had about George Cottrell funding security, staff and housing for Nigel. He is in a difficult place, and I think you're right that this is a smart move to deal with a difficult situation, calling this by-election, and I do hope that he prevails, because I don't want the Reform Party to fail over this scandal. I do think that they are the last hope that we've got of a party that will actually, have the tenacity to try and take down the blob and do something to turn this country around. But I think he probably initially thought, I'll call the by-election because that will reset the clock on this 12-month period you have before you come into Parliament, where you have to declare donations that you have received, thinking that will wipe the slate clean. But then, right as that press conference was about to start, at 2 o'clock, it suddenly got delayed to 2:15, and I thought maybe that was because that was right at the moment that we then heard the news that the investigation would actually continue. If he won a by-election, it would just be paused until he comes back into Parliament. So it doesn't really get him off the hook.
Which could mean we have 2 by-elections.
I know, which is crazy. I think there's a good chance that if he claims that he's done nothing wrong and he's done nothing unlawful, and some will say to that, well, if that is the case, let them investigate you. And then see if you've, let them say that you're innocent. But he might say it's I think he said it's a kangaroo court. There's a chance that they might say that he's guilty of something even when he is not, because he believes that donation was not political. It was for his security. But yeah, I don't think it gets him out of bother. But I think there's a good chance if he wins this by-election and he's now got a new mandate from Clacton and the clock is sort of for that term reset. If they do find him guilty, they would probably see it absurd to discipline him and cause another by-election. It might just, at that point it will be far enough down the line that it's not the top of the news cycle anymore and people will forget about it and get on with it. And that's probably what he hopes for. But it's definitely caused quite the rumble for the Reform Party.
There's a couple of obvious points in this. The investigation is likely to say he should have declared this money. That's not a stitch-up. That's not an anti-Farage position. That will just be an objective. Look, that's the rule. It's literally written there. You broke it or you didn't break it. But it's likely they could come out and say you did. That wouldn't be it doesn't end his career or the Reform Party. The other thing that's an irredeemable reality is that he's going to win the Clacton by-election. If you're the only candidate, it's sort of like an episode of Blackadder, isn't it?
I've got my money on Count Binface.
Count Binface, yeah.
I think he's going to smash it.
The Bin, as we know him as, those that know him up close and personal, the Bin does put on a mean campaign. He's not going to be. He'll be outside Boots in Clacton.
Well,
you believe it, giving out the leaflets.
He's pledged to build at least one affordable house in Clacton.
I love
if
that.
a by-election is called. So
he's got a manifesto and everything,
Yeah,
old
he
bin
has.
folks. I mean, he's up there. So Farage will win, and he's likely to win with a greater majority than he already had, because nobody
yeah, and I
else
think you
has
can
stood.
argue that, and this is what Zia Yusuf has been arguing this morning, that the fact that all of the other parties have said, no, we're not going to stand a candidate, is not because they don't want to engage in a fake by-election. It's because they know that they're going to lose. If you look at if you look at the latest projection, you've got Farage on 48%, and I think the next party is, it's in the teens.
Yes.
But so they wouldn't win. It would be embarrassing. The Tories might once again lose their deposit if they actually had a chance of, let's say, the Tories or Labour fighting a tough campaign and actually unseating who is their greatest political rival at the moment. I mean, that would be a huge win for them if they thought they had a chance at that. They'd stand
Labour were never
going to
win in Clacton. I mean, even before,
exactly.
even the Tories came second in 2024. They don't do that very often.
Yeah, well, that's the reality of why they're not standing a candidate. But publicly, they're saying, it's because we don't want to engage in this, point-scoring fake by-election for Nigel Farage for, his own personal
But the point is, Chloe, that all he needs is that headline, is that I went to the people that put me in Parliament, the people I represent, and they came back with a thumping endorsement, bigger than in 2024. Which bit do you not understand about that? That's all he needs.
Would you say, Andy Burnham's fine, he's got a mandate now because the people of Makerfield voted for him? No, you'd say the people of the country haven't voted for him to be leader of the Labour Party, and I think people will... Yes, it gives him a bit
Sorry, can you stop employing intelligence into this conversation?
It gives him a bit of legitimacy to have a new mandate from Clacton, but that's just one proportion of Reform voters. When he is not just an MP for Reform, but he is the leader of the party and potentially the next Prime Minister, I think a lot of people would say that's not enough. I think it's clear to me that this is about trying to get out of this chaos with the donations. And I'll give his hats off to him that it's a smart move, right? But the idea that just getting a vote from the people of Clacton means that he's out of all the water and it's all,
I agree, but I think...
sunshine and rainbows from there on out.
I would say, on balance, that what he's done is going to benefit him more than anything, unless something else is going to pop up that we're not aware of.
Well, possibly. I mean, the journalists are like, once they get on a roll digging, they don't stop. We just had more news come out that apparently George Cottrell's mother donated £1 million to Richard Tice's company, and there was a loan of 80 grand given to either Richard Tice or his company from George Cottrell. They've started their digging and they're going to continue. So, and we saw this with Starmer with the Lord Ali saga, right? Once they started undigging, it's more and more kept coming out, more and more
over a suit.
Glasses, more and more clothes, more and more stays at houses that belong to Lord Ali. It kept on going. So the question is, how much momentum does this have? And a lot of time when it comes to these scandals, it is pure luck about what else is in the news cycle. If you get hit with a scandal on a day when World War III starts, well, you're lucky. The rest of the world isn't, but you're lucky, right? Because then no one really notices, right? But if big scandals come out and more things that they dig up come out at times when the news cycle is quiet, then it's going to be more painful for them.
This does remind me a little bit of, because lots of politicians have been through this. I mean, I can remember being on air here at Talk when the sort of fag end of Boris Johnson's time as Prime Minister. It was non-stop on Boris Johnson, non-stop. And the calls we had, who at that time were rather supportive of Boris Johnson, these are people that now absolutely hate Boris Johnson. It's funny how that turns around so swiftly. But at the time, this was, it's that bloke from ITV, he's the one stirring the pot, he knows somebody who works at the Cabinet Office and they're leaking stuff and all that, and it was just non-stop. And, of course, it should have been non-stop because he's the Prime Minister. If you are the leader of a party, you're held to account. Angela Rayner, as I mentioned, I mean, during all her tax affairs, you had everybody from, Dan Hodges, who's, regularly talked about as, but he was seen as a, what was it, somebody called him a Labour activist the other day, which is a bit laughable, really, that Dan Hodges is a Labour activist, considering the amount of pounding he not only gave Keir Starmer over Yeah, Mandelson.
Oh, there are plenty of Labour activists that despise Starmer.
And also, that's true enough, but also Angela Rayner as well. He gave her both barrels, and she's sort of Team Burnham in that sense. So, and similarly, Boris Johnson. The one I'm always reminded of, which is slightly away from politics, is when Meghan Markle claimed to be, you know, exclusively marked out as this this target of ridicule and over-analysis. And very few people I think I was the only person that kept saying, have a word with Camilla, because when she first came on the scene, she was annihilated for years, for absolute years. It made the Meghan Markle press coverage look like just a warm-up act. I mean, Camilla got the whole thing, apart from looking like a horse. You know, she was God knows how many years older than Cho. It was all of this stuff. That's how it was framed. And it was daily. It was non-stop. So everybody gets a bit of that. I understand that it's uncomfortable when you're the person at the centre of it.
Yeah,
but you've got to take it, right?
I think that Nigel Farage needs to recognise that if you're a politician, they are going to go through your finances. You're not going to have the.
If you're a politician, somebody gives you £5 million, then people are going to question it.
People are going to question it.
I'm perfectly relaxed, by the way, about the £5 million.
I wouldn't call that an establishment stitch-up. Them wanting to write articles about this and question it. That's just part and parcel of being a politician. He made the decision to come back into public life, to come, to decide to run as an MP and become the leader of the Reform Party again before the last general election. That is partly what comes with it.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that the press have a free pass to do whatever they want. Of course, there are these questions about what Sky News did with knocking on the door of his daughter. There's still a lot of questions over exactly what happened there. Of course, there are limits to it and people have privacy. And if it is the case that the National Crime Agency, as Richard Tice is now alleging now, the National Crime Agency or someone there leaked confidential, bank statements to the Guardian and potentially other members of the press, that is unacceptable. That is not in the realm of, that's what comes in part and parcel of being a politician.
Not. If that is true, then I think I'm right in saying somebody in the National Crime Agency would go to jail for that. I mean, that's a huge breach of trust and a criminal offence as well. Chloe, stay with us. We are going to get into the other kind of side, but it does dovetail into all of this. Has trust in British politics fundamentally broken down? Has your trust in politics fundamentally broken down? And is Reform's latest episode another symptom of that? We'll take your calls, 0344 499 1000. You can message 87222. Coming up on 1:20 this is Talk.
And I've decided today I will resign as a Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea, thereby forcing a by-election, which should happen, I hope, in short order. No, I've decided that the people of Clacton should be the judges of my actions. This will be a people versus the establishment by-election.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots to get through here. 21 minutes after 1 o'clock. Chloe Dobbs is still with us. What about this thing? Because this all feeds in together. It's really interesting. 61% of Brits believe the social contract is broken, with distrust of politicians reaching 58% when combined with those viewing them as corrupt or self-serving. My initial take on this, Chloe, is that when I was a kid, we used to get the Daily Mirror in our house. I don't know why. I don't think there was any massive political reason behind it. My parents weren't political in any way. I would take a punt that my dad might have been a Labour voter, but I never really talked to him about that. But he quite liked Thatcher as well, in some respects. So either way, and the point is this.
It's open-minded.
The paper would arrive in the morning, and I remember at breakfast time, he'd be there flicking through the paper, you know, making his tea, ready to go off to work. And then the next time any news arrived in that house would have been at 6 o'clock in the evening when the BBC News came on, which, by the way, we probably watched for about 3 minutes and then turned it over to watch, I don't know, Home and Away or something, whatever it was. Wasn't going then, but you take the point. And then maybe, if you stayed up till 10 o'clock, the news at 10 with Trevor McDonald. Bong, and away you went. And that was the only kind of digest of news you got. Today, we are in a tsunami of news. It's everywhere.
I know, the morning papers
24/7.
are normally out of date by 9 in the morning.
Yes. They really are. I mean,
It often is the case that something's emerged overnight or early in the morning, and you look at the front pages of one sale on the supermarket and you think, oh, well, there's no point buying that anymore because it just moves so fast. And on the one hand, that is it's great that we've got this technology where we can be up to date with everything that is happening, and also that we have news from so many different people and outlets, not just the BBC. We've got a mix of opinions, but the problem with it is, I think it's the 24-hour news cycle has very clearly affected politicians' behaviour. One of the reasons why we have, I mean, you mentioned Thatcher there, one of the people who many will remember as someone who, you know, like her or dislike her policies, someone who actually had tenacity and cracked on with what she was planning to do. Whereas at the moment, what you see is politicians who, they are so focused on the headlines and what the press is saying about them, because it's just constant, that they actually don't put their heads down and get on with what they need to do. And that's why, for example, we had Conservatives have, you know, a lot of great pledges, but for 14 years they were just, you know, running around like headless chickens, worrying about the headlines, worrying about the next leadership contest. Partly why we have so many leadership contests is because of, you know, the constant headlines, never ending. As I said, once the journalists start digging, they don't stop.
Because if you think about it, back to that era I was talking about, so in the 80s, when, so somebody like Dan Hodges could not have existed in that time. And I say this kindly to Dan, because I know the bloke and he comes on the show with us. But that sort of opinionism or polemicism, however you want to describe it, that sort of genre of journalism, yes, of course it existed. There were always columnists in newspapers that were a bit sharp, whether they were on the left or whether they were on the right. But generally speaking, it wasn't informing any debates. Now, of course, it is forming debates, because that then becomes a discussion. Dan gets invited on a programme. He's just one of many examples, where you can pick Zoe Gardner, whoever you want, but maybe not. But you take the point. You see these debates, then it becomes a discussion. Then you have to get somebody on from the government to respond to that discussion, and then they respond to that discussion, and then it gets mentioned on Question Time, which it never would have done before had the original journalist never existed. So you have a whole scenario that couldn't have happened, literally couldn't have happened, until things like social media, which has added booster rockets to opinion.
Yeah, it's hard. It's pros and cons. As I said, it's great that we've got access to lots of different opinions. It's great that there are, you know, we're able to have commentators and people are able to put their views out there and people are able to have debates rather than just listen to whatever the BBC feeds them, right? Because then the BBC have a heck of a lot of power, especially if the government is putting pressure on them. I mean, we saw, you speak about olden times, but even just, you know, in 2020, think about lockdown and the way that they were, you know, clearly pushing a government narrative. If we only had the BBC, nobody would have questioned it. Maybe we'd still be in lockdowns now. So, yeah, I think there are positives and negatives. this, but I do think that I think Reform are starting to, clearly with this going on there, they're allowing it to get to them a little bit, the pressure, but I do think they're a party that's a bit more distinct in that Farage, generally speaking, usually says, I don't care what you write about me, I don't care what you think about me, this is my mission and I'm doing it.
But everyone has a line when they do start to care.
Yeah, of course. And of course there are, there will be scandals that are big enough that they can bring you down. But nevertheless, you've got to have that backbone and say, I'm thinking long term, I'm here for the long run and I'm going to crack on and I don't care if it harms my popularity in the short term. I don't care what the press say. I'm just going to crack on with the job and do what's best for the country. And I think that you see that more with Reform politicians than you do with those in other parties
I think that's
at the
true.
moment.
But it's not surprising when 61% of Brits say the social contract is broken. And now we have scenarios, again, to come back to the Hodges example. Sorry, Dan, to have selected you as the person for this. But you now have the curious position where in public say Donald Trump makes big announcements on social media. Now political parties all over the world make big announcements. You've now got Sky News, literally the official Sky News account, having an argument with Nigel Farage online in real time for everybody to see. If this was back to the 1980s/90s sort of era, I can't imagine Richard Littlejohn writing a bit of a hit piece on someone in his column and then anybody ringing up the government saying, would a minister like to come on and respond to this? People, they would go, of course I'm not going to respond to it. But now the need almost to have to defend a position is greater. I have to tell you this though, Chloe, treat surveys with some caution, because in the same survey that 61% of Brits said they believe our trust, essentially the social contract with politicians, is broken, a third of Brits said capitalism had failed and a communist revolution was necessary.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, really?
I do wonder how exactly they phrase the questions when they ask people these, because it also says in that a third of Brits endorse conspiracy theories, such as the theory of remigration. So they might have merely said, do you think that some immigrants living in this country need to be deported? And a third of people said yes, and they went, far-right conspiracy theorist who believes that everybody should be deported, believing in... I think when people say the remigration theory, they kind of maybe think everybody. So I'm not sure how much I trust this poll, but the social contract being broken down, I'm not surprised at all by that figure, but I'm not sure that is because of politicians communicating with their voters and the press in an informal way. I think the main reason why the social contract has broken down is because there's such a big disconnect between politicians and the voters they represent.
But has that always been there, but we just didn't have a conduit through which we could discuss it?
I think that
people have always... If you ask anybody, if you went back to 1952 now, if you and I nipped in a time capsule and off we went and went round to the streets and said...
unnecessarily angry?
Yeah, if you went round the streets and said, what do you think of the government? Everyone would go, a bit of rubbish, mate. They don't do nothing for us, working people. I bet you'd get exactly the same response, wouldn't you?
I don't know. I think...
Maybe more politely.
No, we are in a position now where we have had voters vote time and time again, over and over again, for... immigration to be reduced, both legal and illegal, and it's been ignored. Brexit hasn't been, pursued in the way that it should be. Various other things. I think that is unique to a degree.
Well, here's a good example, really. This next story does dovetail into this somewhat, and this is 120 billion quid's worth of tax rises or spending cuts have to happen. That's what Andy Burnham walks into in July the 20th, when he takes the keys to number 10, according to the government's own spending watchdog. But don't worry, because Andy Burnham is fully prepared.
Good growth in every postcode, hope in every heart. That's our mission.
Good growth in every postcode, hope in every heart. Yeah, and a matter of 120 billion quid, Andy, that you've got to find or cut. Now, Reform, this is to me is a great example. Reform would say, we will find the spending cuts for that, and it will involve immigration, it will involve welfare as two obvious areas, but there's lots of other things around. I know, they talk about diversity officers, in the grander scale, it's not loads of money, but if you add all...
Net zero,
Net zero, huge. You put all that together. So that's why people look at the main parties and look at Kemi Badenoch and say, I don't believe she's really going to do anything about immigration. I don't really believe she will close the net zero department, but I do believe Nigel Farage and Reform will.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's what voters think, and people, they don't. The reason why you've seen this unlikely set of events where this brand new party has out of nowhere emerged to being leading in the polls is because of that social contract with the main parties being so broken down. Reform are not perfect; they don't have all of their policies absolutely perfectly figured out yet, and every single number added up. But it seems like they've got more of an idea of how to do it, and that they've got more tenacity to do it than the other parties. Nobody believes what Andy Burnham says about the things that he's going to deliver, because, as you said, the OBR are saying to him, well, you've got to, you've got to find 120 billion out of tax rises and tax cuts in the near future if you're going to have the country's finances on stable footing. How on earth can we believe him when he says, oh, I'm going to renationalise all the utilities? With what money, Andy?
I mean, objectively, you looked at Andy Burnham. If you were a student of politics but knew nothing about Burnham or the history of everything we were just talking about,
stupid, they'll fall
but if
for
you,
it.
well, no, I mean, just notionally student of politics, and came along onto the scene, you would say, no, I think you would look at Andy Burnham and go, well, this man's clearly clinically mad. He's insane. Look at the book. The books say that. He's saying that. Those two things cannot both be true. We will see. It does raise that question, has your trusting of politics completely broken down? And is Reform's latest episode another symptom of that? I would say it probably is. Chloe, we've hit the clock. Thank you. You're on Plank of the Week this week, which I think you're about to record.
Yes.
You better get down to the makeup department in your shiny plimsolls. You can't see her plimsolls. You won't see them.
I'm not wearing plimsolls.
You won't see them on.
I'm just wearing normal trainers.
You know the plimsolls you used to wear at PE when you were 6?
They're not
Those. That's what she's got on. Yeah. She's got the plimsolls. Chloe, great to see you. Thank you. Lots to get through here. Comments on that 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 03, just talked myself out. 0344 499 1000. Chinwagon with Chloe Dobbs. Thank you to her. Lots to get through at this end. Phil says, Ian, I think the main parties aren't standing candidates because they know they probably wouldn't win, as their anti-Farage vote would be split between them. However, as Farage got less than 50% in 2024, that means more than 50% of the electorate in Clacton did not want Nigel Farage. So there is no main party candidate standing. Then those in excess of 50% who voted against Farage last time will surely still want to vote, and so will coalesce around one of the few or only lesser candidates standing, like Count Binface. Which would be humiliating for Farage, as I think he'll lose to the joke candidate, as they will hoover up all of the anyone but Farage votes. Sadly, I think Nigel is going to lose the by-election, says Phil. It's an interesting analysis. I don't think he will lose the by-election because I think most people actually won't. If their candidate isn't there, I don't think they will give it to another candidate. They just won't vote. There will be some. I don't think the Greens are going to say. Any word on the Greens? I doubt whether they will stand. So there'll be a few independents that will take a punt, probably lose their deposit. Binface will become a bit like when people wrote Jedi on the census form years ago. I think it'll be in that kind of ballpark. So you'll get some. Restore, interestingly, are not standing. Rupert Lowe has sort of taken the same, interestingly, Badenoch position of, no, we'll stand if there's a real by-election after the inquiry. I think it would be fair to say, and I've got no qualification for this, I don't think there's going to be another by-election after this. I just think this, unless there legally has to be, I'm not sensing it. James Price is with us, former government special advisor. James, I mean, you know what it's like to be in the centre of a storm, as it were, politically. What's going on behind the scenes, etc., of a major political party. The Reform are going through this right now. This is the assessment they've done. Let's go to the people. It's not national, it's only Clacton, but it will give Nigel Farage a kind of, there'll be a certain vibe to a win in Clacton. If it's greater than 2024, whatever the details say, it does allow him the headline, I went back to the people that put me in power and they voted for me again, but in greater numbers.
Yeah, absolutely right. I suppose in general, if in doubt, the idea of turning to the people is an excellent one. I was speaking to your great colleague Kev O'Sullivan the other day, and I quoted the great Iron Lady. She once said, "We'll tell the people the truth and the people will be our judge." Well, you can't say any fairer than that, can you? And I suppose, I think I've even seen from some strong reform supporters on the internet saying, well, look, on the off chance that he loses, at least he did the right thing of going to the people, and then he can go off with his head held high and we'll all miss him afterwards. So there's a sort of slight fatalism underlying some of this, but I think I'm pretty much 90-odd% with you that he will win this. And I definitely think that this bin-faced fella, by the way, just deeply unfunny, because for every silly joke he's got in his manifesto, the rest of it is even more laughable because it's indistinguishable from what the Green Party says.
So how dare you, James? I mean, how dare you come on here and just glibly, casually have a pop at one of our greatest political representatives? I'm looking at the picture of him now. I mean, what kind of upbringing brought you to this level, James, where you would simply almost libel the mighty Binface?
Well, I suppose he's not any sillier than most of the other people that we've currently got in Parliament, is he? So, and his ideas are only just as mad as...
He's better looking than some of the front benches out there.
Well, yeah, quite. He's probably got more real-life experience, frankly, than anybody else in Parliament, certainly than Andy Burnham, who's never had a real job before. Fair. But I do think that this sort of twee stuff is a distraction from the main issue, and I don't think that it would be a terribly good thing if a man whose hobby is spending £500 a pop to travel around the country, losing badly in by-elections, to be returned as a member of Parliament. Call me old-fashioned and a bore.
Well, as I mentioned a second ago, Jane, you that time when it's sort of Boaty McBokeface Jedi territory, isn't it, where there will be some people who say, no, I'm voting for the bin, as he's known to his up-close and personal friends. I'm going for the bin on this one. I think he's got it sealed, this one. He's got a housing policy. He's promised to build at least one house in Clacton if he wins. So, I mean, it's not as if he's bereft of anything. Tell us, James, on the wider point here, how we got to this stage. What's your assessment of that? Is Nigel Farage being singled out? Is there an establishment coup against him, which would involve all the major political parties? It would involve the media, and of course it would involve what they call the elite classes. Your views?
It's a really interesting way that you frame the question, talking about the establishment, and I think that's a really important thing for us to kind of digest a second. What does that actually mean? Because you'll get some people going, well, Nigel Farage went to public school and he was a banker and he's been in politics for a long time and he wears a suit and tie. He's as establishment as it gets. Whereas, of course, I think that what most people think about when they hear the establishment these days is not earls and dukes and lords and things like that, but it is the powers that be in the BBC and the top of the Church of England and the main political parties and all the quangos and the civil service that have really got all the power in this country these days. And, you know, you've heard me rant to you before about how much I think that democracy has been leached away from Parliament and power from Parliament and from government by all of those establishment quangos. And Nigel Farage does, it has to be said, represent a pretty existential threat to all of that. Yeah. Danny Kruger, his kind of great policy brain, has a very bold policy, for example, of abolishing the entire cabinet office, of abolishing the cabinet secretary, the most powerful person actually in the country, and returning power to the people who have been elected by the people of this country to actually wield that power. That is a major threat. I think all the other kind of quangos and bits of what some people in the United States might call the deep state have obviously got a vested interest in stopping this kind of big, broad revolution that Nigel Farage represents. I don't think it's an orchestrated conspiracy in the sense that Andy Burnham and Kemi Badenoch and the cabinet secretary sit around a kind of dark castle somewhere and plot against him all together. but I suppose their interests also do align, and they all want reform to lose because we don't know quite what a reform government would look like yet. There's still only 8 MPs, still a lot of policy areas where they don't have an awful lot fleshed out. And all they do know is they hate Nigel Farage because he was one of the leading figures behind Brexit, which, as we know, is a very evil thing that the British public dared to wrestle control away from another establishment, this time in Brussels.
I remember talking to a former cabinet minister, now a reform member, I think I've got that right, about this thing called the swamp, the civil service. And I sort of said to her, I said, this, you know, the swamp, this kind of left-wing cartel, this collective of dodgepots that are there to ruin anything that isn't in their secret agenda. I said, is that true? She went, of course it's not bloody true. She said, my civil servants were absolutely brilliant. They were crucial to what I had to do. I couldn't have functioned without them. They were amazing. There are, of course, some that stand in the way. Her argument was much like in a court case. It is also their job to put up all the arguments against something. That what might look good as a headline may not pan out quite so simply as a policy, etc. She completely refuted that there was this almost orchestrated voice against the government. Now, I guess it depends on where you sit politically as to whether you believe that, but this is somebody that you would, well, certainly a reform member now.
Well, I'd say this person is wrong, and maybe I wouldn't dare to guess who it was, who came up with this, but that understanding is possibly why that person is not better known, or whoever it was, did not achieve all the things that they ought to have achieved. Because the fact is that there is a huge opposition to getting anything done that rocks the boat or that goes against what the senior civil servants want. You have to be conspiratorial about this. Yeah. The permanent secretaries, the top civil servant in every department, they get together every week in a formal meeting, and they will discuss what they think is going on. And they are, you know, the people who believe they really do run the country now. The cabinet secretary herself, the most important person, most powerful person, frankly, in the country, has just appointed herself as the defender of the constitution, which is a very rich, highfalutin term, given we don't really have any kind of written constitution, certainly not one except the one that's now in the ECHR that we got stuck with and all the problems that has caused. But you do see this all along, where I think that civil servants have gone from carrying out the wishes of the elected government of the day to believing that particularly troublesome ministers, let alone, gosh, troublesome former special advisors, are there as a sort of virus to which they are the antibodies, knowing they will always outnumber us and always outlast us. And to put this into some context for you, Ian, when I was a special advisor in the Department for Education, for example, 4 special advisors, none of whom had any constitutional ability to direct civil servants unless there was a specific order laid in council, 4 or 5 ministers, of whom one was a member of the Lords, the rest were members of Parliament and the Tory party, obviously, at the time. 8,000 to 8,500 civil servants in that one department alone. And to spend all day, which I often did, trying to stop them doing bad stuff that was counter to what the government was elected to go and do. Had no time to go and push through positive things, let alone fight the socialists in the Labour Party or anything else.
Yeah, they're not worried about that, are they? I mean, and by the way, I should just add that the former cabinet minister who made this comment, in the conversation I was having, there was also another former minister in that conversation who said, no, don't judge this, don't be so generous, he said. Yes, as a minister, you may well have had access to 2 or 3 civil servants that were kind of on your side and were very useful if you wanted the numbers, the data, you wanted a this, that or the other from the department. He said that is not, that does not in any way define the problems we have with the civil service, which I think is, you know, if you wanted to break it down, it's groupthink, and it's often laziness, really, that informs them as much as anything else. Final question, though, James, on this, the breakdown in trust that people have. 61% of Brits believe it's gone out the window. Are reform the party that can change that? Because that's the assessment from the British public, that we don't get what we vote for. We don't really have parties that are, you know, offering to deal with immigration, deal with net zero. In fact, we have the very opposite to that. And when it comes to this deficit, because this feeds in that Andy Burnham's got to find 140 billion quid, I think it is, the only party you could point to with any seriousness to say would seriously address it would be Reform.
There's no difference between the two questions here. And the reason why people feel that they are stuck in this kind of Groundhog Day doom loop where they keep voting and nothing ever changes is precisely because of this system that we have of the all-powerful civil service. So when Keir Starmer won 2 years ago, or rightly perhaps I should say, we Conservatives lost 2 years ago, and Starmer got in by default, I'll ask people who are watching and listening how many people they think changed jobs across the entirety of the British state. The answer of what, 500,000 civil servants and all the rest in central and local governments, just central governments, of course, many more out there. 200 people across the whole of the British state. 100 ministers, 100 special advisors, again, half of whom were not allowed to officially direct civil servants to do anything. And every single other person across every single department, every single quango, every single executive, arm's length body or agency or whatever else, they stayed in post. And we wonder why nothing changes despite ostensible changes in Prime Minister.
Indeed.
There's your answer. Doesn't matter who fixes that until and unless we smash that system up and bring back proper accountability and an ability to actually do the things that people elect politicians to do. We're not in a democracy anymore.
We're going to be here again, you're right. James, thank you. Very thorough stuff from James Price, former government special advisor. He's seen it up close and personal. Dan Barker is a board member with Reform UK, joins us now. Dan, good afternoon to you. Your reaction, firstly, to your leader of your party suddenly saying, I'm going to walk the plank, go back to the voters and hopefully get re-elected again. Your thoughts?
Well, thanks for having me on, Ian. Well, I thought it was quite a bold move yesterday. I was kind of watching the press conference like everyone else. I thought he was going to make a statement saying, look, enough is enough, just highlighting, you know, kind of what the establishment are putting him through. But I thought at the end to kind of say, OK, I'm going to sort of raise the odds here and to call a by-election, because that's what they've been wanting. That's what all this is about, you know, the kind of the sleaze trial, the accusations. They wanted him to be suspended from Parliament so that he has to fight for his seat again. And now he said, OK, well, I'll take control of this. I will take the initiative here. We'll have the by-election. We'll see what the people of Clacton have got to say, whether they want me as their MP. So I think good on him.
So he's going for it. There's no doubt about that. I think anyone, you wouldn't have to be a betting man in this respect, Dan, to say he's clearly going to win it, especially if he's only up against Count Binface. So he's got every chance that he's not just going to win it, but he'll come back with a greater majority. Is that enough? Is that enough to sort of set the records, to draw a line under things and have a complete reset for Nigel and Reform? Because he's been under the cosh. The media, the press, opposition politicians. I know it's part of the game, and Nigel knows it's part of the game. And this time, that kind of that roundabout has merry-go-round has stopped at Nigel's doorstep, quite literally, as it turns out, and focused on him. Will this be enough to get rid of all of that and go back to basics?
Well, it ought to do, because you know, if they are foolish enough, if the Parliamentary Standards Committee reaches its conclusion after this by-election has finished and says, oh, yes, he has broken the rules, therefore we're going to suspend him, and there's another by-election, I think that would be a massive mistake for Parliament, for the establishment, for the other political parties. And I think the people, not just of Clacton, but of the country, would look at this and think, oh, my word, what is this? This has just gone beyond the pale. And let's not forget, Ian, it's not just this. Not so long ago, we were listening and talking about his time at school when he was a teenager. I mean, it's unheard of that, you know, people would go that far back for an elected politician and try and imply that they're racist, bigoted, anti-Semitic from when they were 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. And the thing is, people can see right through it. They can see what they're trying to do to him, and it is not working. And I don't, when they realise, they need to realise that that is the case. They need to win the battle of ideas. And that's what we are doing as Reform. That's what Nigel's doing. We're winning the battle of ideas. They cannot win that.
You're absolutely bang on. And anyone with a brain, even if you hate Reform, even if you're a lefty, would have to acknowledge that last point that you made, Dan, because that is factually correct. Every poll says it's correct. And then you look at this other story we're talking about, 61% of Britons believe the social contract is broken, which feeds into exactly this problem.
It is, and I think it explains why we're polling so high, because there's this sense, there's a malaise, there's people think there's something going wrong, they see the decline, not just on TV, they see it on their doorstep, in their high streets, they see the changes, and they say, I don't like this, I didn't vote for this. In fact, I voted for the opposite of this. Why is this happening? And unless you are, the establishment view is you're up for mass immigration, net zero, closer alignment with the EU and, economic decline, if you're not on board with that, because that's what they seem to be selling, then you are against them, and that's why they are attacking Nigel Farage. That's why they're attacking reform.
Indeed. Dan, great to have you on. Enjoy the afternoon. Enjoy the weather as well. He's Dan Barker, board member of Reform UK. There is no doubt about it. This has been put brilliantly by Brad in Cambridge, who says, we need to remember the only reason Kemi and the Tories are talking tough on immigration and net zero is would have to, at some level, continue with some of what they talk about. It's interesting, the different types of... we know there's different types of Labour supporters. There's the obvious former Labour Sultanas and Corbyns of this world, and then there's the kind of Blairite contingent. But I think that divide within parties is particularly pronounced in the Tories when you consider the... Boris Johnson is a good example. Boris Johnson didn't give a hoot about immigration, not a care about immigration. And when he was asked during the Brexit referendum, during the campaigning for that, to kind of get animated about it, he didn't want to. He said, no, this is nothing to do with my arguments about the EU. No, absolutely nothing to do with it. Wasn't even on his radar, didn't recognise it at all. So the Borises and the Camerons of this world are a different type of conservative. I think Kemi Badenoch is slightly more into the terrain of understanding these subjects, but Brad is absolutely right. That's come around largely. Even Keir Starmer has changed things because of reform. And they realise reform are talking people's language. So what do you do with that fact? So even if you're not going to vote for them, you have to acknowledge that the game-changing parameters have happened because of Nigel Farage and reform. 0344 499 1000.
And I've decided today I will resign as a Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea, thereby forcing a by-election, which would happen, I hope, in short order. No, I've decided that the people of Clacton should be the judges of my actions. This will be a people versus the establishment by-election.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just a random one here from Testy McTester, who says, are you doing the voice of doom today? I've got the answer. I'm champing at the bit, mate. Champing to the max, says Testy. Yes, we are doing it today. It's only day 2 as well of the new Voice of Doom. Hope Tessie didn't miss one and think we're still on the old one. That'd be grim, wouldn't it? Yeah, it's back in around about an hour. Psst. That would... is what? Oh, yeah, the one before was Count Binface. That's right. Count Binface was our previous voice. He only lasted a day. I don't know how. I'd never heard Count Binface, but clearly hundreds of people had. Chris is in Derbyshire. What have you got for us, Chris? Afternoon to you.
I think the fact that the other parties are not willing to stand in the Clacton by-election really shows the contempt they have for the common man, essentially, for the ordinary, everyday person, the man on the street.
They're arguing, though, Chris, they're saying that Nigel Farage has contempt for the system that he should allow to play out first, and then there's a by-election, not just call one off his own back because he feels like it.
But I would say, you know, let the people decide. Let the people hear what all the different viewpoints are, and we'll make up our own mind. The fact that we're not even being given the choice really shows...
I mean, I tend to agree. I don't think it makes those parties look... I mean, obviously, if you pathologically hate reform, you will probably say, yeah, that's a good thing that they're not standing. But if you are...
I mean, it's a PR disaster. It's an absolute disaster, you know?
But their argument is that there will be a by-election because they believe Nigel Farage will be discovered to have... Well, I don't know whether the word is guilty or whether it's, you know, failing to declare, whatever you call it, that would perhaps result in a suspension and therefore a by-election. So they're saying that's the proper system.
The optics of this, I really don't think they've looked at the optics of this.
I agree. I think it looks like they're scared, apart from anything else, and it looks as if they are doing exactly what Nigel Farage is claiming, and that being the establishment.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely right.
Listen, great call. Chris, thank you very much indeed for that. Steve says, I can't believe this, but Dominic Cummings was right. He predicted this would happen to Farage, almost to the word. If reform collapses, I'm off to Portugal, says Steve. Yeah. No longer in the World Cup, though, so you better leave it a little while. Thank you for that. Egypt, Argentina. What the hell? Man alive. That was... And you think Messi is like 107 years old? Comes back like that, 2-0 down. Good Lord. OK, it's not TalkSport, but worth a mention. This from Georgina in Cambridge. I do think Nigel Farage has made a big mistake in how he's handled this. He should have been honest about the money. A big problem in politics is trust. Nigel not being honest and causing drama to avoid scrutiny just shows he's as bad as all the rest. Although his argument is that he got a personal... His argument is it's a personal gift. It's a lot of money. It's unconventional. It might not be usual, there's no precedent for it. I get all of that, but his argument, his evidence to the committee is this was a personal gift. It was nothing to do with politics, and therefore I didn't have to declare it. I know people will say, well, the rules do cover that as well. We will see what comes out of this. Some breaking news. Neo-Nazi Alfie Coleman, 22-year-old, has been jailed for 13.5 years at the Old Bailey for planning a mass gun attack after being snared by MI5 in an undercover sting. Not sure how familiar you are with that story, but neo-Nazi Alfie Coleman has been jailed for 13.5 years. Much more detail coming from you. Loads of great comment. We've got a couple of things up and running. One is the obvious response, because that response continues to this by-election and what it means. But I think the wider question about the establishment, has trust in British politics fundamentally broken down? 0344 499 1000. And is Reform's latest episode another symptom of that? More of your calls and comments on the way. Let's get the news at 2.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Yeah, welcome. Home of Common Sense, loads to get through, as you are clearly fully aware. God knows where you've been if you're not. Nigel Farage resigned yesterday as the MP for Clacton. It's forced a by-election, but every major party has refused to stand against him. Only Count Binface is confirmed as an opponent, and it may well remain like that. Farage versus the bin. It sounds like a knockout fight in Las Vegas, the sort of thing you'd pay Sky box office a tenner for. Will you be there? More details on that. I want your comments more generally on what's happening there, but it does feed into a couple of other stories. A new poll revealing 61% of Brits believe the social contract is broken and distrust of politicians has never been higher. This does knock on from all of what Farage is talking about, whether you like him, hate him, believe him or not. There is certainly a disconnect that seems to be growing between the voter and our elected masters. Your thoughts on that? And also dovetailing into this is the OBR, which is warning that Britain's public finances are on an unsustainable path and will require £120 billion in tax rises or spending cuts to stabilise debt. The start warning that any deviation by Burnham from Reeves's borrowing plans could bring forward a full debt crisis in the next few years. So this is very serious stuff. I know the OBR can get things horrendously wrong, and we'll talk to Liam Halligan, the economist, who's brilliant on this stuff, and get his wider assessment on all of this. But the reason it dovetails into the other stories is because, of course, Reform are, again, I'll keep saying it, love him or hate him, the only party, as far as I can see, that is promising fundamental, systemic change in the way we do business and our priorities and what we spend money on. If you said to the Conservatives, will you be able to find 120 billion quid, either through tax rises or savings cut, they couldn't really, I don't think with any authenticity, give you an answer. Labour, I don't think, are remotely capable of achieving this. But you know what? Reform would come along and go, yep, where do I sign? Because we'll put our name to this one. We will absolutely find a way of cutting that money. We'll look at immigration. We'll not just look at it, we'll do something about it. And if they don't, by the way, it would have been the greatest breach of trust of any political party, and they would acknowledge that. So they've got half a year to a year, if they're in power, to do something about it. If they fail, then they are consigned to the political dustbin. But they would do something about that. Net zero, they would do something about. They would say, right, at the moment, it's a luxury. Maybe someday we'll come back to it when we've got loads of money. At the moment, we haven't, so we will put that to one side, and we will drop and put a pause on net zero. They would look at welfare and the extraordinary, out-of-control, unsustainable nature of our welfare bill. We talk about it often. So you would absolutely get that from Reform, and you would not absolutely get that from the other two major parties, which brings us back to the question about distrust in politics, why Nigel Farage's party had been, for 350 polls, I think he referenced it yesterday, have come top of who is likely to form a majority at the next election. So with all of that in mind, where are you on trust with politics? 0344 499 1000. So let's go to work with Liam Halligan, economist, and joins us on the programme to help us out with this kind of stuff. Liam, good to see you again. 120 billion quid, the last time I looked, is quite a lot of money. It's up there, it's the OBR. I know they can be a bit shaky, sometimes wobbly on occasions, completely wrong about things. Your overall view, then, of this figure they've come up with and what needs to happen?
Well, I think it's good that the OBR is putting its head above the parapet and more actively promoting these realities. 120 billion quid, that is the education budget, what we spend, what the state spends on education in a year. It's about twice the defence budget. It's also roughly what Britain is paying in debt interest every year. So that's the amount of money the government spends just on paying debt interest. After health and then welfare, debt interest payments on our existing debt are the third biggest item in the government's national accounts on the spending side. It's absolutely outrageous. And I've been saying it for a long time, Ian, as you know. For a couple of years, I've become Mr. Sort of Sandwich Board man. Talking about these economic realities, lots of sniffy comments from people at the Bank of England about what I say, and the Treasury and other so-called rivals I have in economic journalism saying I'm overdoing it. Well, look, since I've been saying that Britain might need a bailout from the International Monetary Fund for the last year, guess what? The former chief economist of the IMF has said the same thing. Charlie Bean, who used to be number 2 at the Bank of England, saying the same thing. Professor Jajit Chadha, who used to run the National Institute for Economic and Social Research, our leading economic think tank, he ran it for 10 years, saying the same thing. When is our political and media class going to wake up to the fact that we cannot keep spending money at the rate we're spending? And when are they going to wake up to the fact that the tax burden in the UK is now above its previous post-war high and heading much higher? The more we tax now, and even the OBR is saying this, it's full of statist economists. These guys have got very little to do with financial markets. They're very cautious, pretty grey people with respect to them. Even they are now saying what is definitely true, that if we keep raising taxes, we will kill growth in this economy and you'll end up with less revenue. The more you raise tax rates now across many headings, the less tax revenue you're going to get. And that is what's really spooking financial markets.
And what spooks me about that is that the last time I looked, a lot of this stuff is sixth form economics, right? I mean, this isn't even that hard to get your head around.
Well, I can get my head around it, Ian. I'm a bear of little brain, right? No, seriously, this is not difficult stuff.
Yeah.
But, you have so many... for so many people on the left of politics, the centre of politics, for so many people across the civil service, to acknowledge this stuff is to offend your statist sensibilities, your tribal ideologies. You've still got absolute morons saying, oh, Andy Burnham can loosen the fiscal rules so we can spend a bit more money because we've only 95, our national debt's only 95 to 100% of our GDP. Our national debt is about the rate of growth of the national debt, and our national debt has been growing far faster than any advanced nation for the last 25 years, and particularly over the last 4 years since the end of lockdown. Since the end of lockdown, Ian, we've spent 80%, right? 80% of what the government borrows on debt interest payments in 3 of the last 4 years, and in the other year we spent about 75%. I mean, that is a Ponzi scheme, right? And that's why increasingly it's not rich people lending the British government money, it's pension funds, it's insurance companies, it's charities, it's big investors around the world. They're lending the British government money, 20-odd billion quid a month, and over half of most months of what we borrow, we spend on debt interest. And across the year as a whole, it's 80% of what we borrow, we spend on debt interest. It's completely and utterly unsustainable, and I worry my old friend Andy Burnham coming into government, at the behest of the trade unions, the Labour activists, the Labour MPs, they're all going to keep pushing him left because it's the right thing to do. Well, it isn't the right thing to do to, push an economy over a cliff, because when we do that, inflation spikes, the currency plunges, massive austerity measures imposed by global technocrats from the International Monetary Fund and elsewhere. It happened in Italy, Spain, Greece at the beginning of the last decade. And during those really nasty meltdowns, it's the poor that suffer most.
Every time. And we've been also looking about trust in politics this afternoon, Liam. And I would argue that this does feed into Reform's star rising. Now, whether people love Nigel Farage or don't, everybody can agree that they do have, and I'm sure there are some, if you did a deep dive into everything, it might throw up some anomalies. But broadly speaking, on the big issues, things like immigration, things like net zero, things like welfare spending, all of those areas, they are immovable on their intention to fundamentally change those big areas of spending in this country. Something that we know is not real. I mean, Kemi Badenoch is kind of hinting at a bit of it, but you don't get the sense it's in her DNA. Labour, it's certainly never been in their DNA. And then people wonder why Nigel Farage and Reform are doing rather well. But perhaps it is because they are touching on these very, not just important issues, but crucial and fundamental issues.
I think the picture's mixed across the centre-right of politics, if I may, Ian. I think Reform are obviously very strong on immigration. They've been very strong on net zero for a number of years. I'd say they're a lot less strong on their plans for the public finances, because Reform is much more of a mixed bag. You have people in Reform who are, Thatcherite when it comes to their economics. They want state. You have other people in Reform who sense that in order to do well across the red wall in some traditional Labour heartlands, they want to spend more money on benefits and welfare. It's actually quite mixed. The Tories under Kemi Badenoch, I'd say they've certainly really tightened up their message on net zero. She gave that speech last March where she said the targets were impossible. That's why the Tories won the South Aberdeenshire by-election. When Burnham won Makerfield, it wasn't noticed, but that was basically because the Tories are trying to say to people at the heart of Britain's oil and gas industry, Aberdeen was the energy capital of Europe at one point until Ed Miliband and net zero destroyed their industry. Completely outrageous. Yeah, the Tories definitely shifted on that. And also, being objective, and I try and be objective, as you know, I'd say the Tories' plans on welfare reform are pretty well sort of hashed out. They've got £47 billion a year of savings by the end of this Parliament under their plans. Those plans have been published for a while. Reform haven't produced anything like that I've seen, and I followed the parties very, very closely, and I know a lot of people at the top of Reform, as you know. But at least now you have parties in opposition not just doing the endless Dutch auction of ever higher impossible spending promises that we've had in the past. Across the centre-right, I agree with you. There is now a sense that, look, we've got to hold hard here because people can sense we're spending well beyond our means. And of course, it's hard to promote the idea of fiscal consolidation, so-called austerity. Of course it is. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's nice. I'm just saying unless we do something, the economy is going to fall off a cliff edge. And it is by no means just me saying that. And I think Reform and the Tories now understand that, and they're starting to. And in the end, the public will vote for stiff measures if they think that we need them. Yeah. I mean, they voted in Maggie Thatcher in '79 after the winter of discontent, as you know. The Tory Labour coalition after 2010. Yep. After the global financial crisis, something needed to happen because the public finances were spiralling out of control. My only, my fear is that the political media class won't get their head around the stuff I've been saying about a possible international bailout until there actually is a possible until
they're in it. You've just reminded me, Liam, as well, and this gets completely forgotten. But pre-2010, if you remember, just before that election, we had Nick Clegg, Gordon Brown and David Cameron. For the first time, we saw these televised debates. Do you remember they were falling over themselves to talk about who was going to be the most austere government? There was no weirdness about it. I remember The Guardian doing a poll saying, yep, 78% of voters support austerity, it's got to be. And it was all very sort of amicable and agreeable that this was going to come. And then, of course, the Tories got in along with the Lib Dems, imposed some austerity. Whether they went for all the right areas is another debate. And the world lost its mind over it. So you can't do any of this stuff. This is outrageous.
Well, that's politics for you, isn't it? Yeah. Showbiz for ugly people. The reality is, Ian, and I looked at the numbers a lot, and I've been doing some long-form writing lately that's taken me across these numbers. During those austerity years, 2010 to, say, 2019, I'm not saying there weren't parts of the state that suffered. Home Affairs suffered, the judiciary suffered, the court system suffered, some local governments suffered. But if you look at the entirety of public spending and the national debt between 2010 and 2019, these so-called austerity years, again, I'm not saying there weren't aspects of it that were really, really hard. But during that period, the national debt as a share of GDP doubled.
Wow.
Right? During those so-called austerity years. Yeah. And had we not at least slowed down the rate of increase of spending, then we would have gone the way of Italy, Spain and Greece, and indeed my beloved Ireland, which also had, external global technocrats, unelected people running your government.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine that. Imagine that. That's where we are. Unelected people running your government. And it's only under those circumstances that international investors will keep lending to you. And it's only because of that that you can then pay benefits and pensions and do the things that the state needs to do. And those unelected international global technocrats will impose, there's nothing Parliament can do about it, severe spending reductions.
Yeah.
Really humiliating, damaging. They will scar the economy for 10 years. And they won't just scar the economy, they will rip at the social fabric. They will tear apart the tapestry of this great country. There will be great shame if that happens to us. And it happened 50 years ago, Ian. 50 years ago this year, in 76, the IMF had to bail out the UK, and it could happen again. And when are people going to start listening to people who understand this stuff? And at least the OBR now are putting their head above the parapet and joining people like me who have been saying this for a very long time.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the T's and C's with a bailout are pretty darn brutal. I don't think many people have actually done their homework on that. I do wonder also, Liam, just a final point really, and it does feed into all of this again. We talk about the civil service, often called the blob, the swamp, whatever people want to refer to it as. Some suggest that that is really where the big barrier is on these things. So governments come along, they have some big ideas, and Humphrey comes along from the civil service and says, nope, you can't do that. This groupthink, this pervasive groupthink that seems to control and run the civil service is the problem, not politicians. Your thoughts?
I think there's definitely an element of that. I think the Home Office basically has been employing a load of people who are activists, who don't want to control borders, who see it as their overinflated sense of superiority is such that they see it as their mission to actually make it easier for people to come to the UK against the wishes of the vast majority of the electorate over many, many elections and so on. So I think it's been the case of sort of big promotion of net zero in the Department for Energy among civil servants. So yeah, I do think there's a lot of that pushback, and I do think civil servants, with journalists going on fishing expeditions, have ousted certain, centre-right ministers, Conservative ministers, with so-called bullying claims and whispering campaigns, and servants haven't been able to do their ministers haven't been able to do their job that they were elected to do, and I think that's absolutely outrageous. And be in no doubt, whoever becomes the next government after the next general election, if it's some kind of reform coalition, some kind of centre-right government, then they are going to have a really hard time rooting this out across the civil service. And we're going to need to be really, really tough about it. And it's not going to be pretty. And again, to say that fills me with no pleasure whatsoever. But I think it's a realistic assessment of where we are.
I think you're absolutely bang on. Dare I say, without blowing too much smoke, Liam, as ever, bang on, and always appreciate you being on with us. Thank you. Liam Hannigan, The Economist. He just lays it out brilliantly. He's objective, intelligently thought through. Realities, not realities, things that are immovable. This is not like, well, maybe that this could change. No, the realities. And we get into bailout territory. Man, we're going to be doomed for... I remember going over to Greece, by the way. We mentioned Greece, which was famously, absolutely scuppered by this. We were over in Greece for a wedding, and talking to people who worked in hospitality, in bars, and people who ran, those kind of small village bars. You get about 17 people in at a push, and that includes the seating outside. One of those places, chatting to some of the people there, they were broken. They were absolutely broken by what had happened to their country. And the hourly rates and the money, I remember one guy explaining how much his wife was bringing home for a 50-hour week. It was, and what you could and couldn't buy for that. It was just insane. And if we're going down that path, and as Liam was saying, unless somebody gets a grip on it, we will do, then you think we got problems now. This will be a crude and perverse warm-up act. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I've decided today I will resign as a Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea, thereby forcing a by-election, which would happen, I hope, in short order. No, I've decided that the people of Clacton should be the judges of my actions. This will be a people versus the establishment by-election.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
That was it. 03444991000. 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. Amanda says, didn't Tony Blair fill the civil service with his lot? So why should Nigel not be able to do the same? And that's the point, isn't it? Filling the it's quite hard to fill the civil service with your own lot, because you've got to get rid of people or simply add to it to do so. And getting rid of people in the civil service, I mean, if you're in the civil service, you can't lose your job unless you commit murder. On that point, Mag says, I never realised until 6 months ago that I was a civil servant. 1960, GPO telephonist, General Post Office telephonist. Wow, I remember the old press button A and press button B. Happy days at the old GPO. Many moons ago, obviously. Mags, thank you for that. Mags, was it? Yeah, I mean, if you are... when I worked for the BBC for half an hour, technically you're kind of a civil servant. You're paid by the state. You're not a civil servant in the sense you're enacting policy or crafting policy, but in the same way the police officer is, a teacher is a civil servant. Every doctor, nurse is a civil servant. I guess it depends how you define it. This is Tim in Worthing. What have you got for us, Tim? Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
Nice to speak to you again.
You too.
I think earlier you asked the question, is the social contract broken?
Yes.
And then, of course, I listened to Liam Halligan, who I, probably like you, I've been aware of Liam and what he's been saying for the past couple of years, 3 years maybe, or even actually going back to the COVID years when he did Planet Normal. Absolutely bang on the money.
Yep.
I think you've only got to look at the state of the country where we are. I was explaining to your researcher, so I'm actually kind of between jobs now. Having worked 47 years, left home at 16, joined the Navy, blah, blah, blah. I'm alarm clock Britain.
Yeah.
I've only got to look at the fact that nothing in this country is better now than when I left school at 16.
It's bizarre, isn't it? That's not meant to be how it works.
No, it's not. And to end up where we are now with nothing better, and we're in debt to the tune of almost 100% of GDP. And I unfortunately, I just lost the signal when Liam said how much interest we pay. Is it 20 billion a month? Roughly?
Yes, that's what he said.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot of money, that, isn't it?
It is bonkers.
Yeah.
And to think that the rest of the mainstream politicians are not prepared to talk about that openly, and people like Burnham are prepared to borrow more. It's utter madness, Ian. And it makes me part angry, part dread for what's going to come in my near retirement, although I'm going to end up working into my retirement, and it makes me dread even more for my young grandson. What
I dread, Tim, and I share all of those last points you made there, but what I dread is that Andy Burnham's instinct is not to cut spending, it's just to increase taxes. And you only get taxes from one place, and that's from people who go to work. You can't take it from anywhere else because it doesn't exist. So we're going to find ourselves in this curious place. They'll probably do something with stamp duty and council tax. I know that's widely seen as in desperate need of reform across all parties. But if you're somebody who owns a moderate house and discover that your monthly council tax bill is going to go up from 200 quid a month to £800 a month, then that's going to become unsustainable. That'll be like a kind of the old council, what was it called? What was it? Council? No, what was the poll tax? That was it. It'll become like that to many people because they'll say, "Well, it's not the principle I'm against; it's the amount."
Yes. Well, I'm kind of torn at the moment. Yeah. I'm thinking along the lines of I am just going to earn less, so I pay less tax. I would rather go without than work harder, pay more tax, for them to waste it again. And I'm really quite angry about it. That's how I feel now.
It's only when you go down the rabbit hole, isn't it, and really start thinking, you know, when you lay in bed at night and start doing the numbers loosely in your head and you start going through it and think, well, hang on, whatever way I turn, there is a sort of a state barrier in the way, whether that barrier is basic taxation or whether it's something. It just feels that the place we should be, and I guess I'm not a dissimilar age to you, Tim, and I share exactly that thought. What is sad is, and I often give this example, you know, if you said to the Victorians, what will life be like in, you know, 126 years' time, they would predict that, you know, everything would be, I'm not suggesting we're like the Victorians, although some people, you know, might argue we are, but the journey of improvement has not kept up with where we should be. We shouldn't by now be in this place.
No, we shouldn't. And it's because of politicians' ineptitude.
Yeah.
Ineptitude, lack of willpower, integrity, some of them blatantly dishonest. And as we've also spoke about earlier, with this entrenched civil service, you know, behind government that resists change. And and
also, I don't think we have serious enough people in politics either. You know, the idea that you go in there because of I think most politicians, and this is going to sound like a big generalisation, Tim, but I think most of them are there because it's quite a good job. As distinct from being fair. You know, they might have a pet project that they, you know, want to advance and probably go nowhere anyway, because pet projects are pretty rare to get enacted into some kind of law. But generally speaking, yeah, they might be good at responding to their post bag or their emails, but I think most go, this is a good job and it'll suit me well. Yeah,
I think you're probably right, but I think a lot of the other facts, and I think I've spoken to you about this before, the one thing that is missing and is not promoted by government nor education systems in society is this sense of personal responsibility.
Yeah. It's gone.
And until we get that back, I can't see our world changing for anything better, sadly.
Spot on. Tim, it's a pessimistic point, but I think it happens to be a very realistic one as well. Thank you. Great call. Tim in Worthing. The other thing that haunts me and kind of kicks me awake at night, there's a long old list of stuff that does that, is this welfare budget. And if you look at it, you know, we talk almost on a weekly basis. There's a new set of stats that tell us there's 100,000 people claiming collectively £1 million a day for ADHD issues. Now, notwithstanding the reality that there are people who are crippled with ADHD, I get that, we all get that, anyone with a brain gets that. The fact is, if you suddenly took that money away, so Reform, the Tories, whoever, come in and go, right, OK, we're going to whip 50 billion pounds off welfare. And there'll be a lot of people, particularly on the right, that will go, yeah, absolutely, we can't afford this stuff. It's completely nonsense. It's all over the place, and we know it's not sustainable. You're then left with a different reality that you don't really think about when you're opining about the amount of money we spend. And that will be various families that are sitting in homes right now with no ability to feed their kids. Now, they will be the extreme examples, because the short answer is, well, go and get a job, mate. If those people are arguing, I can't get a job, my disability, neurological or otherwise, is so bad, I can't get a job. So what are you going to do? Leave a family of 4 with starving kids? Or a single parent with 2, 3 kids? And that's the welfare system is essentially like it's almost like the blackmail department, because there's not much you can do about it. And once you've started the process of paying somebody for something, to stop it is almost impossible. It's almost impossible. I know it shouldn't be, hear me out, I know it shouldn't be, but it almost is. And that's the reality that a Reform or a Tory coalition, whatever it happens to be, that's what they will come up against. Now, just a reminder, later in the show, I'm going to be letting you know how you could bag a massive £26,000 in tax-free cash. You're aware of this. This is all down to Talk's World Cup celebrations. Let's hope it continues after this coming weekend. If you can't wait, you want more details right now, then simply head over straight away to talksportwin.com. That's all one word, talksportwin.com, where you'll find everything you need to know. It's just gone 2:30.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're back, just gone 2:30. Now, new RAC figures show that over 30,000 drivers caught doing 30 or faster in 20 zones last year, including one doing 114 miles an hour in a 20 near a primary school. Nobody's defending this, by the way, but with 20-mile-an-hour limits spreading across the country, ULEZ expanding and drivers squeezed at every turn, is this government's answer to bad driving simply to make driving itself impossible? And I tell you what, the 20-mile... You know, every time they do a 20-mile-an-hour limit, the cost involved in that is absolutely massive, because you've got signage and God knows what. We talk about wastes of money. ULEZ camera. What does one of those cameras cost? I hate to think. The technology in one of those cameras is massive. We have not just one wall of them around the capital city in form of the original congestion charge. I mean, when somebody told me that years ago, before it happened, that it was going to happen, we just thought we'd met a liar in a pub who was making up a story. How can you put cameras around a whole city? Oh boy, they did. And then they added to them. And then they added to them. This is a lot of money on this. Nonetheless, no one is defending ridiculous speeding. We all get that. To help us out on this story, our friend Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel UK. Howard, good to see you. Look at you sunning yourself in the garden there. I hope you've got an ale with you.
I certainly have got an ale. In fact, I've got a glass of wine as well.
Nice,
but,
nice. I did say ale, not an owl, by the way. Just think,
No,
you might have one of those as well. I don't know. In the Kent countryside, who knows? Listen, I mean, look, these figures are, you know, no one's going to defend mad speeding, and someone who was doing 114 miles an hour near a school, frankly, I'll stick him in jail for about 58 years for stupidity. That's a separate point. There is something bizarre going on here, though, and that's the taxation of drivers.
Absolutely. I mean, we've spoken about this over the years, haven't we, Ian? I mean, you know, and it's good to see you again. I haven't seen you for ages. And, yeah, we're looking at 1/6 of Britain's roads now at 20-mile-an-hour limits. That's 40,000 miles of roads of 20-mile-an-hour limits.
Wow.
And it's an interesting statistic, though, that and I'm just quoting a DFT stat, the Department of Transport stat, supports the view that driver-rider behaviour and errors are more frequently cited as contributing factors in collisions than speed alone. So I mean, the whole point, dangerous driving, I abhor. Yeah. We have got to sort that out, and we have got. When was the last time you saw a policeman on the street, or even in the old-fashioned Panda car, going up and down the roads checking on people driving properly?
Yeah,
we haven't got that. We rely on this technology, the cameras. You beautifully said about these cameras, and they are hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of kit going in just so that they can milk the motorist. Mm-hmm. That's what it's for. And we're looking at something like, since the 20-mile-an-hour per year, we get £50 million of fines have hit the motorists for 20-mile-an-hour. People doing 23, 24, 25, that sort of level they're getting. And the interesting thing is all that money, fines and all those speeding fines, don't go to local authorities to do something about that road if it's got a history of problems of speeding. It goes to central government to pay for benefits.
I mean, it's curious, isn't it? Because what you've done there is defined exactly what ultimately surely is the aim of all of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for 16, 17 years now. The motorist is an easy cash cow. Yeah. And I understand I'm doing a lot of research at the moment to find out what Andy Burnham is going to deliver in his government, what his transport minister will be, and who his Chancellor of Exchequer will be. But I'm hearing from backbench people that because of the debt, because of the mounting debt, we're seeing that borrowing's gone up yet again today, all those sorts of things. And, you know, we're seeing inflationary pressure because of the Middle East war. We're seeing oil prices going up again in the last day, gone at $8 a barrel. Well, I'm afraid, guess what? They're going to try and get more money. And the easiest target, and we've seen ministers sitting around the Treasury table and the Cabinet table saying, how much more can we get out of people to pay for benefits? And the biggest target, of course, and the easiest of targets is the motorist.
Yeah, indeed. The fastest somebody was caught speeding was 161 miles an hour, recorded on both the A5 in Shropshire and the M6 between Stoke and Stafford. That's how fast he was driving. He got from one to the other place in in a very short period of time. I mean, that is crazy. I don't know how that would feel. What's that place in Germany? The Nürburgring. You know the place, Howard, where you can go and you can drive as fast as you can. And I went there with, I think it was Jaguar, took us on a press trip. And we turned up and they said, and I was a bit hesitant about this because I've been reading all sorts of stuff about, you know, how things can go terribly wrong at the Nürburgring because you have people, particularly motorcyclists, interestingly, just doing very risky stuff. And so I thought, oh, it's all right. I'll just drive myself around there at a sort of reasonable speed. So I turn up and then I get introduced that this woman says, "This is your driver." And I went, "What do you mean my driver?" She said, "This is your driver. This is Mick Smithers," whatever his name was, the fastest man ever in a Jaguar. And I thought, what? And he took me round this place. I tell you what, it couldn't have ended quick enough. It was actually quite quick. It was. I think we did 155. I think, and it was horrifying. And that was with a skilled professional driver in conditions that we were, you know, adapting to. So to do 161 on the A5, I mean, you wouldn't be able to even see the flipping road, surely.
Well, I've done some of those tracks as well. I've done the Nuremberg as well, and I've also done a driverless car on the Nuremberg, would you believe? And that is spooky. But you're right. I mean, I've also been on the Autobahn years ago. I'm old enough to remember the time when there was totally, you could do what you want on the Autobahns. And there's a good friend of mine, bless his cotton sack friends, I won't mention his name, but unfortunately he's not well anymore. But he used to drive his Mercedes around about 130, 140 regularly every day. And he took me once from all the way to Frankfurt from, I can't remember where we went from, it doesn't matter. But I honestly, my eyes were shut, I was shaking, I couldn't take it. I mean, and that's my point about it. This whole thing, it's dangerous driving is the problem.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily, obviously 161 in a 20 mile an hour, it's just, that is dangerous driving. But you see so many people doing, even at low speeds driving. I get behind little hatchbacks, bless their cotton socks, that, you know, going along at about 11 mile an hour. And that's caused frustrations and problems. But the cause is because they don't know how to drive properly on the roads.
Yep.
Yes, and of course, outside schools, hospitals, no one's arguing with that. Not at all. No one is doing that whatsoever. But when you get a situation where you've got a dual carriageway that's at 20 mile an hour and you're driving down it something like 2 o'clock in the morning, give me a break.
And of course, the campaigners that argue for this, I mean, politicians, you know, Wales, of course, famously did the entire place out into and then had to row back on that 20 mile an hour limits. I think it's implemented because they think it makes them nicer people for some reason. Nobody ever asked for this. No politician, when they went out knocking on doors, whatever political party they were from, and said, "What is it you want from me as your politician?" No one ever said, "Oh, what I'd really like, love, is a 20 mile an hour limit." Nobody ever said that. It didn't happen. And no one will ever say that. But for some reason, somebody gets into power, they sit around the old oak table at County Hall or wherever it is, and they cook up these plans that nobody wants, and then they deliver them at extreme costs.
You're absolutely right, and it is purely a cash grab. It's been like that for years, and we've managed to. I can't believe how Fairfield UK has been successful in actually keeping fuel duty frozen during 2 budgets of this Labour government. Yeah. I'm amazed. We've worked hard at that, as you know, what we do. But I'm here. Andy Burnham is very favourable to putting fuel duty up significantly, whatever that means. Yeah. But as you probably you know, hopefully I'll come on your show and talk about this as time goes on about this. Tax on the motorists. But one of the things about the 20 mile an hour, and we should take this into account, is driver frustration, potential high emissions in low gears, stop-start traffic, and distraction from constantly monitoring the speedometer. It's dangerous to drive at 20 miles. That's an interesting, yes. People just don't understand that. When you're looking down, hang on, am I doing 20? Am I doing 20? Not all of us have got automatic speed limiters or, cruise control, all those sorts of things. Yeah. And these people are, they can't help but do 25 mile an hour.
Indeed, and when you're driving behind them, the brake lights that are, I mean, they're only doing about, I was behind a woman the other day, she was doing about 15 miles an hour, and still the brake lights kept coming on. I thought, what is she slowing for? What does she think? We're on a straight road. There's no even a speed hump. There's nothing. And yet the instinct to just keep hitting the brake pedal seemed to be there every 7 seconds.
Well, I've always remember a friend of mine, bless his cotton socks, he used to drive down the road, and any time a car coming on, his foot was on the brake. Yeah. A car coming towards him, right? And on the opposite side of the road, he still put the brake on. I said, "Why are you doing that?" He said, "Oh, I'm just being careful." I said, "What for?" There's no problem at all. And that's my point about, I actually do favour much stronger control on how to drive and people driving properly. Yep. There's a lot of good drivers out there that actually do speed, but they're safe. So those are the sorts of things we've got to take into account. And if I ever became Minister of Transport, every single road in this country would be reassessed for speed, in terms of what they should be, because we got de-restricted zones, 60-mile-an-hour levels on narrow lanes. You can't see around the bend. But if you had involved in a crash at 59 mile an hour, the coroner's report would simply say they were not speeding.
Yeah.
I mean, and yet it's dangerous. And those are the sorts of things. Common sense, as you know, Ian, doesn't exist.
Absolutely bang on. Howard, great to see you again. Thank you. Howard Cox, founder, Fair Fuel UK, making some stunning points there. It is interesting. I mean, speeding at those kind of speeds is ridiculous. By the way, when I did the Nuremberg Ring thing, they said to me before I got in the car with the fastest driver of a Jaguar in history, whatever his title was, they said, do you want a crash helmet? Huh? Do I want a crash helmet? And I went, well, yeah, I think I better have a crash helmet. And when we were about halfway round, when I thought this is obviously what inevitable death looks like, I thought, what is the point? If we crash now, the crash helmet's going to do... I mean, the autopsy would say he had a great brain, but his rib cage looked like birdseed. His legs looked like he'd been through a shredder. But his brain was fantastic. Still kept his looks and everything, right to the bitter end, as the rest of him went through a German forest. Disturbing stuff. But, of course, people are doing those kind of speeds on our roads. I don't know how if you've got family, you'd think, wow, I mean, the chances of a crash are pretty high, and the chances that the people doing those kind of speeds are any good at driving are pretty low, right? Let's be honest. Back to your calls. Tristan is over there in Bedford. Tristan, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
I'm going to take something that you usually say. It's not in their DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And Labour will never... They need to, as Liam Halligan says, they need to scrap net zero. Simple as that. That is the one of the, apart from immigration,
Sure.
that is the biggest payment that we keep paying out for, and it just keeps increasing every year. And every year, Ed Miliband, who's never worked in the energy industry,
Nope.
all he's ever worked in is in government, and he's got a war chest of 60 or 70 billion, and he keeps handing out contracts every single year to solar and wind farms.
It is ridiculous, and we're not making any money. I mean, they keep saying all the green jobs. Think of the green jobs.
No.
The green jobs. Do you know that your bin man, Tristan, is counted now as a green job?
But that's
So when they say, there's 30,000 or 300,000 green jobs, it's like most of those are people that already work in areas that have now been redefined as being a green job. I'm not against new innovations, and that's fantastic, but I don't think we're making a pile of cash out of windmills and solar panels, because we're buying them all out of China. So we're not manufacturing these things, so you can't even make that argument.
No, but on top of that, we cannot updating or increasing the grid. So when these solar panels and these wind farms, are looking to generate this energy, the energy isn't actually transferred over to the grid because of the grid can't take it. But the thing is the energy companies are still paying these companies as constraint payments at higher and higher inflation rates, and then those money that those energy companies are then paying out to these companies. Your bills then go up.
Yep.
And it's just this never-ending chain reaction that it's just never going to go away.
It's never going to go away. It's a vanity project. It's an expensive vanity project. It's all about signalling your virtue and preening your kind of green whiskers to the rest of the world, going, look, we've got all these panels, and aren't we fantastic? If Andy Burnham came in and scrapped that into, I don't know what department, how much that department is given. You gave us a figure there a second ago, Tristan. What was it that Ed Miliband's got?
He's got a war chest of 60 to 70 billion.
Wow. So you get rid of that for a start.
And he will not budge on any of it. There's no updates to the grid as
it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. I'm not against somebody firing up their windmill and getting free energy from it, or their panels on their own house. That's fantastic.
No.
Right now, this country does not have the luxury to afford that kind of budget. So you'd get rid of that. You'd go to Aberdeen, as Liam Halligan was saying. You'd start reopening oil in that neck of the woods. Not just the physical sense in doing that, but the message it would send to the rest of the world, Tristan, that the UK is back open for business.
But as I said to you last week, Ed Miliband, you know, he will be the Chancellor, which is
that's going to be I'm hoping that phrase when I was cooking my chops that evening, Tristan. I thought back at our conversation. I thought he said that with some level of surety, but I don't know. I'm hearing.
My friend works in the exchanges.
I can see. I can
70%.
Yeah, well, I reckon it would be the kiss of death for Burnham if he did that. But then, as we said in our last conversation, maybe Burnham's going, do you know what? There's more lefties than there are righties, so I'll have a greater number of people on my side.
Well, just to end with, considering Burnham's going to ignite the Chagos deal, I've got absolutely no faith.
I mean, wouldn't that be something? Just at the point when we're royally skint, let's give a place that we already own 40 billion quid. I mean, this is beyond insanity now. This is kind of a bad joke.
And I'll just finish with you. Those constraint payments, they are paid every quarter.
Well.
And those solar panels, because of the grid can't take the capacity, those solar panels and wind farms, those are switched off, and we still make the payments of millions and millions.
Of course we do. Of course we do. It doesn't, but it's the sort of thing you could have introduced and done a dry run on if we were rolling in cash. If we were so rich, we couldn't we was just absolutely laden with wonga. You could go, right, let's give that wind farm thing a go, shall we? And if it works, maybe going forward, it might turn out to be a good thing. You could do that, but at the moment, when you are as badly skint as this country is, you can't go down that path. Listen, Tristan, thank you, mate, for that. I've got there's absolutely no chance, is there, of Andy Burnham coming in? And, I mean, why? Why would he not come in and go, yeah, do you know what, this whole net zero thing, we just can't afford it. He doesn't have to say he fundamentally disagrees with it. He doesn't have to say that Ed Miliband is a half-wit. He doesn't have to say any of that stuff. He could say, I endorse it, but we can't afford it. So at the moment, it's going on hold. We're going to take that 60, 70 billion and we're going to put that elsewhere. We're going to couple that with the drilling in Aberdeen and the like. It's not that in itself is also not the end of all our problems, but a massive symbol that we are a country that has an idea, a philosophy, a direction. It's thought about it and it's enacting it. And that's what we don't have. We haven't had that for flipping years. So you need that. The message to the rest of the world will be, there's going to be some countries that go, what are they doing over there, closing the windmills? You don't have to close the windmills that are already there. If somebody wants to continue using what they've got privately, that's up to them. 034, the taxpayer should not be footing the bill. 0344 499 1000. So the voice of doom. We've got day 2 of a brand new mystery voice. It's political. Who is it, is the question. Hopefully we'll get a winner. We'll play you that voice in just a couple of moments' time. It's 10 to 3. This is Talk.
The thing that most makes me angry about Keir Starmer, talking about the need to defend our country, and he's gone out of his way to not make the tough decisions, to actually do the thing to defend our nation. It's cowardly, and I think it's treacherous.
Nothing to say on immigration, nothing to say on benefits, nothing to say on jobs, nothing to say on tax. Absolutely appalling. If this is the solution the country's been waiting for, then we are in a very, very bad place.
People up and down the country are asking why they are always being put second. They work every day, they get up, they pay their bills, they look after their kids, and yet the other side of the social contract is not being held up.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's a real delight to be doing shows like this at a time like this, when there's big, chunky news stories out there that requires a bit of common sense employed. And the callers and the comments we've had have been absolutely brilliant this afternoon. And it does reignite a bit of faith. So whilst the system around us is falling apart, politicians haven't got a Scooby when it comes to what they're doing in so many areas. It is at least a little bit reassuring to know that you're not alone in identifying some of the big problems. On a lighter note, we always bung this one in, usually around about this time. Didn't yesterday because of emerging news stories about Nigel Farage, etc. So the voice of doom, for those who do not know, there's going to be at least a couple of people listening to this right now who've never, ever clocked this show before, or at least this feature of the show before. It's essentially a mystery voice. I know we're not reinventing the wheel when it comes to radio features in doing a mystery voice. The only difference, which I think gives us a little bit more leeway to get away with it, is that it's specifically political. So you're always looking for a politician or somebody who is obviously intrinsically linked to the world of politics. So they could be a left-winger, a right-winger, male, female, dead or alive. One simple question. Who is this?
What we want to do.
Oh, OK. Bit of an accent there, maybe. I can't say too much. Let's hear it again.
What we want to do.
It's a great clip. I love the clip. Who put that together? Sam? I think so. Let's hear it again.
What we want to do.
Who's that, then? 87222 is the only way you can get in touch. It was Testy McTester earlier that contacted us and said, I know who the voice of doom is. So we're expecting to hear back from Testy to see if he's got it absolutely right. If we get a right answer, we obviously tell you in the next hour. If we don't, it rolls over for what will be day 3 tomorrow. 87222 is the only way you can take part in this if you know who this is.
What we want to do.
It's quite funny the more you keep hearing that, isn't it? Can I hear it again?
What we want to do.
I don't know why, it's funnier the more you hear it. Thoughts on that? 87222. Back to the calls. Mark is in Lincolnshire. What have you got, Mark? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi, yep.
Oh, right. Yeah, what have I got? Vote bin face, get Farage out.
What do you think?
That's what I've got.
If you were in Clacton, you'd be voting bin face, I'm assuming.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I'd seek to embarrass him as much as I possibly could.
Why would you? I mean, here's the thing. I mean, it is interesting. You've got your own politics and you're a Restore supporter, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you were faced in Clacton with a by-election and the choice was Nigel Farage or Count Binface, surely Nigel Farage is at least 98% of the DNA that you would share. But you'd go for Binface?
Politically, yes, but I think it's an ideal opportunity to get Binface in. Because I've always had a dream that I want to see Binface in Parliament asking the Prime Minister a question.
As a bin, or as the person within the bin? Or maybe there is no person within the bin, that is literally what he looks like.
Well, exactly. It's all a mystery, isn't it?
Did we ever see Binface? Did Binface ever remove the bin?
Not as I'm aware of. I mean, at the end of the day, Ian, Farage is just... He's distracting, he's massaging his own ego and distracting from a legitimate investigation. The other parties have taken the right decision here, to be honest, because why should they play to his fiddle at the end of the day?
Point.
Especially when there is half a chance that there could be a second by-election, which tells you everything you need to know about Farage and what he thinks of his constituents. He's inflicting a by-election on them at one of their busiest times of the year.
So you feel this is a vanity thing, a stunt? How would you define what Mr. Farage has done?
This is a vanity thing, isn't it? I mean, he waffles on about the establishment, Ian, but, just a few weeks ago, the same people, the same press, were telling everybody, don't vote Restore, vote Reform. They're the only ones to keep Burnham out and all this stuff. And these were front-page stories, Ian. They weren't complaining about the press then. They were reposting those stories. just like they did when, when the press were attacking Restore.
Well, the one thing I think we all know about the human condition is that you get annoyed when it's one of your own, and if it's somebody else, you're absolutely fine with it. I mean, Prince Harry and Elton John and co. just lost a court case because of what they call press intrusion, and everybody thinks they're a bunch of wilfs and deservedly lost, which I happen to think is true. But, of course, that was all about journalistic techniques and the like and what was printed. Listen, I stopped there, Mark, because we've hit the clock. As ever, always an engaging call. Mark in Lincolnshire. The voice of doom, who is this?
What we want to do.
87222 if you think you know.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome back. We are, of course, talking Clacton. We're talking Nigel Farage. Forcing that by-election yesterday, every other major party has refused to stand against him, leaving only Count Binface as the confirmed opponent. This might mean, by the way, when you have to read out the list of candidates once you get towards an election, that all I'll be saying is, and just to remind you, the list of candidates for Clacton are Nigel Farage and Count Binface. That'll be it. We won't even need to pre-record it, really, will we? But will others be joining the fold? There's a vague story on social media that Lawrence Fox might dip his toe into the Clacton waters. We will watch with interest. This all comes as a new poll reveals that 61% of Brits believe the social contract is broken in this country, and distrust of politicians has never been higher. I think it all feeds into it. Nigel Farage, of course, is dining out very much on the it's him versus the establishment. Is that how you see it? Do we just overanalyse and read too much news these days? Everybody's got the spotlight, the microphone, the conch. We can all have a say, whether it's in a newspaper article, on the comments section, or social media, or programmes such as this. We certainly invite your comments. And the OBR, again, this is relevant to all of this, has warned that Britain's public finances are on an unsustainable path, requiring £120 billion in either tax rises or spending cuts. This is just to stabilise our debt. It's a stark warning that any deviation that Burnham might take from Rachel Reeves' borrowing plans could bring forward a full debt crisis in the next few years. This is deeply disturbing stuff. Andy Burnham's not stupid. He must know this. So what's he going to do? Cut spending or just raise the taxes of people who he thinks and his advisors think are worth a few quid? 0344 499 1000. So much to look at on this one. It's fascinating on the who's got a few quid thing. All of these stories, you think, like stereotypes is a good example. We often talk about landlords and property on this show, and there is a sort of stereotype that all landlords are robbing tenants blind. They don't have a roof on their house, it's full of mould, they couldn't give a hoot, and they're just trousering loads of cash from poor people who are trying to do their best to pay extraordinarily high rents. Now, of course, bad landlords do exist. They're such a tiny minority. You would never identify a minority that small in any other industry to rechange all of the rules and regs around it. But even those on the left who are intelligent, I'm talking about politicians that went to Oxbridge, for goodness sake, they will play that out. That, yeah, landlords, tax the landlords, that's who you need to tax. Landlords, they're great, point to them. And there's other areas where this happens as well. So my point is, it would take nothing for those around Andy Burnham to just simply say, well, if you earn X or you work in this field, go for that group. Tax them more. Tax the landlord more. Double their council tax. Oh, you've already done that. Well, triple it. Well, in some areas, you've done that as well. Well, quadruple it then. They're making loads of money. They're landlords. Yeah, some of them are just paying their mortgage with their rent, OK? So it's an interesting picture. How this will pan out, we'll know by about the 20th of this month, which, by the way, is in 12 days' time. We get a new Prime Minister. Isn't that weird when you think of it like that? 0344 499 1000. Now, let's move to this story. This is every one of Prince Harry's 97 allegations against the Daily Mail has been rejected. Not some of them, half of them, every single one, with the judge finding all 55 articles were lawfully sourced. Harry calls it a whitewash, the Mail calls it a conspiracy to destroy the paper, and lawyers say it could mark the end of historic hacking claims altogether. Let's speak to Alexander Larman, author and journalist. Alexander, good to have you with us. I mean, this was, whatever way you slice it, a thumping victory for what people would call the free press.
Oh, absolutely, Ian. I mean, I knew, and I didn't know, I'm not a psychic, I was fairly sure that Harry was going to lose, but I didn't realise he was going to lose this badly and this completely, because what I'd heard was that he expected that even if some of the verdicts went against him, some would go in his favour, and he was all set to do a kind of victory speech yesterday, where he would have said this is a victory for the forces of essentially people who are against the press. Of course, it went so spectacularly against him and his co-litigants that he couldn't say any of that. So there was that ridiculous, pathetic statement that he made last night about a whitewash. The problem is that you're absolutely right. I mean, this is going to have huge consequences for freedom of the press. It's going to have huge consequences for phone hacking cases. And if I was somebody at one of the previous organisations, including indeed News UK, who had settled in the past because they didn't want a trial, I'd now be thinking, why didn't we go to trial? Because what Associated did, they deserve immense credit for this, is that they stuck to their guns and they said, essentially, we do not believe that any of these stories were unlawfully obtained. And as you said a moment ago, the judgment made it absolutely clear that the judge agreed with. Because what seemed very clear during the trial itself was that the stories were not, they were standard journalistic stories. And you might disapprove of the methods of how they're obtained, but there's nothing illegal about being a journalist and getting stories. I mean, there's a classic example is that writer Charlotte Griffiths, who befriended Harry and got stories that way. Now, the messages came out in court and they were slightly, some of those messages, things about Griff dog and Harry missing snuggles with her and stuff like that. And you might think, well, it's a bit much, isn't it? But nonetheless, all of these stories were obtained by tried and tested journalistic methods. And so the utter failure of Harry's claim it's hugely embarrassing for him. It's a massive, massive defeat. Financially, it's going to be catastrophic because it's entirely possible that Sir Elton John, one of his co-litigants, will pay the entire bill. And I mean, I don't know how much it's going to be. I mean, 50 million is a sum people are talking about. I think there is an amount of, say, up to 14 million who would have been covered for by insurance, but there's going to be a huge amount of shortfall, whatever happens. And we're going to see at the end of the month precisely what that shortfall is. But I think both in the immediate term, I mean, it's ruined this week for Harry because no one's going to care about any of the Invictus stuff now. It doesn't matter. I mean, whatever he does, it's irrelevant. This is the big story of the week, and this has completely overshadowed what he's in prison for.
And it kind of reminded me in the sense of how many people... There was everybody from Simon Hughes, ex-Lib Dem MP. Of course, that all became a separate iffy factor in this case because his claim fell outside the limit, but that wasn't advanced in the trial sufficiently. So there's a bit of dishonesty there, I think we can fairly say. Doreen Lawrence, as you say, Elton John and others. I mean, I'm sure Hugh Grant must have been in there somewhere because Hugh Grant is wherever there's a case to have a pop at the press. Hugh Grant's usually on there as well. But what I thought was interesting, it seemed that, and again, you mentioned previous cases where companies have settled because the hassle and the cost of going through it was just too time-consuming and often too expensive. Much in the same way, you know, have you had an accident that wasn't your fault, or were you missold some financial and everybody put an application in, half of them were never true and they didn't get it. This was that same kind of, oh, I'm a celebrity, I've been mentioned in, you know, I know somebody who got given some money in a case. I won't go into too much detail, and they wouldn't tell me how much they were given because their name was written on a notepad associated with someone. They didn't ask for any money. They didn't claim any money. Someone got in touch with them and said, oh, you do know your name is on this list. It's a list of, you know, this list is what this journalist has. And this journalist has been seen to gain unfair access or some moody methods or whatever the case. I mean, it was ridiculous. The whole thing got out of control. This brings it back to a bit of brevity as far as I'm concerned in this respect, Alexander.
No, absolutely, because I think that what was the case was that a lot of people in the past were settling because they didn't want to have these huge legal bills, because as we've just said, I mean, you're talking legal bills coming in for tens of millions. Now, I don't know about you, Ian, but I don't know why they're so expensive. I don't know why they're in the tens.
I've never understood it. I think it's a big lie as to why they're so expensive.
Well, there's this rather extraordinary barrister called David Sherborne who's been acting for Harry. And, of course, he has a reputation for being the barrister that celebrities go to. He's Harry and Meghan's go-to barrister, and he's always tanned, and he's very charismatic and so forth. But the question is did he say to Harry and to Sir Elton and all the rest of them, I can make you all this money, I can win? Because he should have known there wasn't much of a case. And what was so interesting about the judgment by Mr. Justice Nicklin yesterday was that he made it abundantly clear there was no real grounds for the case ever to have been brought. And you think, I'm not quite sure why it took him months to do that. I mean, you would have thought he could have done that in a couple of weeks, but nonetheless, I don't know at this point if Harry or anyone else is going to appeal, because Harry does tend to appeal. I mean, he is a serial litigant. He spent the last few years suing all manner of people, including, of course, this country's government over his security. And I think it's fair to say that people are fed up with Harry, and it's also fair to say that this has been such an embarrassing and crushing defeat for him, that if he has any ounce of sense or anyone telling him, giving him any advice, he would now leave Britain, take quite a long time out of a public spotlight, and just think, well, what do I want out of life? Because it can't be this. It can't be this reputation of being a serial litigant and a serial pest, let's be quite honest about it.
If you've lost 97 allegations, a full sweep, as it were, then anyone that advises you to appeal should probably not be a practicing lawyer, frankly.
No, of course not. And I think this is what the problem's going to be. But Harry has surrounded himself by now with yes men. This is why so many of his actions are so stupid. He does not have good friends around him, or even people who are paid to be advising him and giving him the kind of advice that he needs to listen to, the impartial, straightforward advice. Because you see, could you imagine Prince William having done something like this? I mean, I can't, let alone the king.
Absolutely right. It's going to be interesting how this plays out, not just because of a potential appeal, which, as we've alluded to there, I don't think is likely to happen, but what it means for Prince Harry, where he goes next as an entity, as a brand.
Well, the question that you have to ask is, well, who's going to pay the bills? Because I'm sure that Sir Elton is going to put his hand into his pocket, but The question that lots of people have to ask is, how wealthy is Harry? Because he goes on and on and on about his security and so forth. But if you look at the way that he and Meghan, I mean, the Netflix deal has come to an end in any meaningful way. A lot of the other sponsorships and things like that have not worked out. I mean, the spare royalties are presumably drying up by now because nobody bought the paperback of that book after the initial. What's he going to do? And we're going to be faced with a very interesting position that, just as the Duke of Windsor, when he was exiled from the royal family, had to do more and more absurd and desperate things in order to earn money, Harry potentially facing this bill of tens of millions of pounds, not having the money to pay it. I mean, what is he going to do? And I mean, I can't see Meghan being delighted at the idea of being married to this man who has gone from being a prince to being a pauper.
Yeah. That would be something, wouldn't it? That'd be the last we saw of Meghan. She'd be off. Listen, Alexander, great to have you on with us. Thank you very much indeed for your time. He's Alexander Larman, author and journalist. Very common sense stuff. And look, if you're in the public eye, whether you're in the public eye because you're a kind of celebrity, whether you're in the public eye because you are a member of the royal family or a politician, you're always going to, and this has always been the case, and I appreciate sometimes the pressure of being followed might be a bit of a pain in the backside, and yes, if somebody is trying to get a story on you and they're talking to your mates about things, that I'm sure is a bit annoying sometimes. There's a cat and mouse game between these people, all right, because I'm telling you now, all of them not only will endorse but actively enjoy those camera lenses on them when they ask for it. Whether it's the red carpet, whether they are conveniently seen doing something normal like pushing the kids on a swing in a play park, coming out of Tesco with a ready meal, whatever it happens to be. When it suits them, when the agents set it up sometimes, or even when they're just papped because they've turned up at a nice restaurant, a restaurant that you absolutely know is going to have some of those guys outside. If you don't want to be photographed, don't go to that restaurant. It doesn't mean you're public property. It doesn't mean that you should have a cameraman in your bedroom or your kitchen while you're making a tasty fondue. It doesn't mean any of that, but it does mean that you have to sometimes accept that there is a level of interest in you. And that level of interest will come from different means. If you're a politician, that level of interest has a very different kind of resonance because you are somebody who wants to be making laws and regulations. If you're a member of the royal family, you are part of a privileged set of people who are largely paid for by the taxpayer. I want to know where my money is going. I do want to know a little bit about those people. And I can't uninvent the genre of tabloid, which, by the way, is not a byword for trash journalism. Tabloid and tabloid writing is some of the most articulate, clever and a difficult form of scribing, writing and journalism you will ever see. A tabloid writer, I'm telling you now, could write for a broadsheet. A broadsheet writer can rarely write for a tabloid. There's a real skill in that job. And yes, we're human beings. We sometimes like tittle-tattle. And if you get a little bit of goss from someone, it's going to be printed. You're famous. That goes with the territory. I don't want any prince or anyone else telling me that I can't try and get a story on them if I believe there's a story that could be in the public interest. And I know in the public interest is different, as distinct from of interest to some members of the public, but it's a free press. And I tell you what, if you start coming down and putting barriers up and saying that you're not allowed to be in a certain place or talk to a certain person, etc., then we have a problem. If that is what is being asked, then that is the end of a free press. And it's not for the likes of Prince Harry, Hugh Grant and that other cartel of dodgepots that seem to dwell on this kind of and dine out on this kind of stuff. Their hatred for newspapers in particular is just off the scale. I get it. Sometimes you'd have had a bad encounter. Sorry, Hugh, it goes with the territory, particularly when you've been on occasions caught literally with your pants down, while at the same time claiming, come see my film, I'm famous because of me. Yeah, I want to know a bit more about you, frankly. It's the world we are in, and I don't want to change it. 0344 499 1000. So we've got the voice of doom, haven't we? We've got the voice of doom. Have we got a winner for the voice of doom? That's the question. This is the mystery voice we played you just before the news.
What we want to do.
What we want to do. Did Testy get back in touch, by the way? Do we know? Let's have a little look at Testy's guess. Right, here's some of the guesses. Hans Blix, no. Of course, former Swedish diplomat and I think he was a former UN's weapons inspector from memory. Actually, he was... It's because Finn, our producer, has written that down. He was famously, actually, a weapons inspector. Pim Fortuyn, the Dutch politician, no. David Lammy, Klaus Schwab, no. Kofi Annan, he was, of course, head of the UN, not him. Brigitte Macron. Let's hear it again.
What we want to do.
It couldn't possibly be Brigitte, because that's a man's voice. Boutros Ghali, former UN man, no. Rodri Morgan, wasn't he the Welsh First Minister? No. Jacob Rees-Mogg, no. Michel Barnier, the French politician and the EU Brexit negotiator, no. Gordon Honeycomb, British broadcaster and television news presenter. Gordon Honeycomb, I remember him literally as a kid. My nan loved him reading the news. It wasn't him. Robert Mugabe, former president of Zimbabwe. It was not. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. How was that? President of Brazil, no. Liz Truss, yes, it's Liz Truss, no. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, Director General of the World Health Organization. Oh, Tedros, we remember him from COVID. No, it wasn't. Martin Luther King Jr., no. Desmond Tutu, no. And Testy McTester, who early doors said, I hope you're going to do the voice of doom because I've got the right answer. He says, was it Dame Thora Hird? Let's hear that voice again.
What we want to do.
Testy's gone and done it. Of course it wasn't Dame Thora Hird. But a lovely guess from the Testy. No, it's not true. We haven't got a winner. It rolls over to tomorrow for day 3. Right now, 3:20. This is Talk.
The thing that most makes me angry about Keir Starmer talking about the need to defend our country, and he's gone out of his way to not make the tough decisions to actually do the thing to defend our nation. It's cowardly, and I think it's treacherous.
Nothing to say on immigration, nothing to say on benefits, nothing to say on jobs, nothing to say on tax. Absolutely appalling. If this is the solution the country's been waiting for, then we are in a very, very bad place.
People up and down the country are asking why they are always being put second. They work every day, they get up, they pay their bills, they look after their kids, and yet the other side of the social contract is not being held up.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Silly question. Let's go to a couple of comments. We're going to talk to Mary in just a second. Barbara in London says, if you treat Binface as a joke, if elected, he would receive an MP's salary of £95,000 plus expenses and a home in London. Would he wear his bin in PMQs if indeed he showed up? What use would he be to Clacton? If they vote for this character, they deserve what they get. He wouldn't be given a London home, by the way. He might choose to live in a London home, but I think, and you might get some expenses towards it. But yeah, would he take the job if he was elected? It's a good point. Dan says it's not politics. People have lost trust in Ian because politics is politics. It's the way democracy is being undermined by politicians. It's what gets up people's noses. And the sense that there is no sense. And it's you know, we do form opinions in very different ways than we used to because of the access we have to the news cycle that we never used to have. And social media has lobbed a couple of booster rockets onto that point. And therefore we analyse and endlessly debate, and sometimes in a very uninformed, unhelpful manner, but other times rightly so. We can hold politicians to account. We can see what they're up to in far more instant and transparent ways. It all exists in real time. You don't have to wait for the gong at news at 10 on the telly for Trevor McDonald to tell you what's been going on in the world that day. It's there all the time. As a result of that, we are more discerning and critical about our political masters, and we call it out more. And when you see daft things going on, that you discover that someone's been fired for a non-offence, or someone's had a knock at the door with 6 vans of police officers outside waiting to have a word, then because of something they wrote on Facebook, that kind of stuff sort of, whilst that's not necessarily the responsibility of an individual MP, it feeds into a sort of an insanity, the lack of social contract, which we've talked about, the lack of, why am I living in a country where this happens? Why am I living in a country where 1,000 men can float across the channel in a boat and be put up into a hotel? It happens so often that we've almost lost sight of how utterly insane that is. Doesn't matter whether you're left wing or right wing. Anybody can go, well, that's ridiculous. Got 80, 90, 100,000 over the course of a year coming on a boat. Really? Is that what we're doing? This is mad. Ed Miliband building windmills. This is mad. And we're skins at the same time. It's that, isn't it? That I think is where the trust gets eroded. Mary in Hemel Hempstead, what have you got for us, Mary? Good afternoon.
Well, with regard to the Nigel Farage saga,
yeah,
it proved one thing, I have to say, that as all the other parties are banding together against what's happening, then it proves that they are a uni-party after all. There are no different from one to the other. They've all got together and they've all come to this decision collectively, and it goes to prove that they are the uni-party, as Nigel has said for years.
What is I mean, both the Tories and Labour will say, well, you know, there's dozens of differences between us. Why would we be the uni party? We have completely different ideas on how to fund health. We have different ideas on immigration. We're not the uni party at all.
Yeah, but when it comes to the crunch, and things are likely to pick up for them when they're doing so badly, which is both Labour and the Conservative, that's when they all come together as one. They're a nice little clique. They're all the same. They're all...
But they don't... I mean, when you say come together as one, do you think they just do that organically? They don't even have to meet to come to these agreements? Because I don't imagine Kemi and Keir sit in a room together going, right, what have we got this week? What's going to be our common ground today?
Well, quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if they had a secret meeting. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And people talk about, like, those that have left the Tory party to go over to, to Reform. Well, that means that they were the ones objecting to what the Tories were, so the ones that are left are still the Lib Dems. You see what I'm saying? So the ones.
Does that mean all the ones that are left are the Lib Dems? I mean, you're saying that because Tories are often called Lib Dems in disguise. I think Tories would say, no, come on, that's an insult too far. We might not be on the same page as Suella Braverman on certain issues, but we're certainly not on the same page as Ed Davey.
Well, look, maybe not. I mean, he is a bit of an idiot, admittedly, but there again, there seems to be a bunch of them all in the Parliament anyway.
There's a lot of those, yeah.
But what I'm saying is this, is those that had the courage to own up and say, what we're belonging to is not what we fought for, or, you know, stood for, left. So therefore, it stands to reason that those that are left are the ones that would have brought down the decline of the Tory party. Kemi Badenoch may be very good. I don't know if she's just talking the talk, time will tell. But the point is, she needs the backing of her party.
Well, she does seem to be. I was listening to her on an interview earlier, and I thought, God, she's good. She was really good. And I thought, this is somebody that could easily be Prime Minister. But unfortunately, I don't think anybody knows anything about the rest of her front bench. I mean, there's Mel Stride and a couple of others. But we can't really name these people. Unless you do this for a living, you're familiar with some of it. I don't say that as a superior knowledge. I just don't think they've cut through as a collective. Kemi Badenoch is quite popular, but she's more popular than her own party, and that needs to be addressed.
Yes, I agree. And as far as I'm concerned, there's Chris Phil, but as far as I'm concerned, he's a real old Lib Dem. Now, he's in a senior position behind her.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't been got rid of. He hasn't gone. So it just stands to reason. But I just feel that this has been a collective decision by all of the other parties not to stand deliberately, and that shows them, to me, as the uniparty.
Interesting. Mary, thank you very much indeed for that. I tend to think, I don't think there's in fact, I know there isn't a secret agreement, even an unwritten one. But I think both have experienced the same problems, which may well be linked quite a lot to the civil service and getting stuff done. And I think both have rolled over too often and said, oh, you know, we'll have to dress it up in a way, but we can't do this, because they'll come up with an idea and they'll put it to the system, if you like, which would involve heavily the civil service and other agencies and organisations. And the answer that will usually come back when you want to change something is it's going to be a lot of hassle to do that. And or it will be very expensive to do that, because you'd have to get it through here, and by the time you've done it, it'll be about 6 years down the line. It's that kind of thinking. That's maybe an extreme interpretation of potential events. I think that's what's happened, mostly, and hence the uniparty tag. If you want to analyse the policies of Labour and the Tories, they're certainly not a uniparty. There is no agreement. There is no, and there's a chasm quite wide between so many policies. However, the upshot in not getting stuff done that people want you to do and want you to be robust on. I've always said this. It's the Donald Trump example. When Donald Trump, he doesn't always get it right either, but when he comes out and says, this is clearly nonsense, we don't want this happening, it's not going to happen in our country. So you'll get one of those stories of where somebody has had a knock at the door because of something they wrote on a WhatsApp group. I'm thinking in particular the story of the parents who kind of fell out with the school governors, and I think both got arrested and handcuffed, which is kind of odd. I happen to know and used to work with one of the dad. I mean, to put the guy in handcuffs was curious. This was something about a conversation on a WhatsApp group. They were a bit of a pain in the backside to some governors, by all accounts, and that's what it was. And was it 3 big vans and, I don't know, 15 cops showed up? You want a Prime Minister that's going to go, no, that's going to end now. Not we're hoping to stop non-crime hate incidents, or we're hoping to stop the... No, that's going to stop now. Day one, Andy Burnham, day one, 20th of July. Right, before I go any further, I just went to see the King. He's asked me to form a government. Secondly, anyone who gets involved in one of those kind of cases, that stops now. That stops today. Stupid jobs, jobs that shouldn't exist, non-jobs, that all stops today. You don't hear that. And I think you don't hear that because they're kind of sort of tacitly trained to believe that there is you play with a certain set of rules, and then you add in a few of your own at the end. And it should almost be the other way round. 0344 499 1000. Just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Batley Dave says Liam Halligan said if it were a revolution, Labour have always been economic lemmings. All hark, a cliff, we are splat. Fair point. This from Jackie in Hants says, I don't think an MP that resigns should be eligible to stand in the subsequent by-election, especially if they're under investigation as well. If my MP did that, I would not vote for them on principle, as they are wasting time and money. For what? There was a suggestion that Reform had offered to pay for the by-election. I'm not sure that would be... I don't know what the latest is on that, but I'd be pretty sure you're not allowed to... a party couldn't pay for the by-election. That'd be seen as all sorts of improperness. On the point of improperness, Virgin Media are in the news because they've been fined a record £28 million by Ofcom after it was found to have actively incentivised staff behaviours that deterred customers from leaving. An investigation found millions of customers' calls were likely mishandled with excessive hold times and unnecessary transfers. I was talking to one of the guys in the office about this who'd had direct experience of dealing with these people and said it is just the most ridiculous thing. It's like trying to cancel I accidentally subscribed to something online a little while ago. It took me a whole evening to find where to unsubscribe on a website. It's that, but with bells on. Let's speak with Adrian Mills, consumer expert, good friend of the show. Adrian, always good to see you. I mean, 28 million quid, not an insignificant amount of money. This was obviously taken very seriously by Ofcom.
Can I just put you on hold there? I'll come back to you in a few minutes.
If you wouldn't mind.
Right. It is ludicrous. It is my absolute bugbear, is that how many of us, and I suspect all of us, have fallen foul of these call centres, big businesses, and in particular broadband providers, where you decide, oh, hang on a minute, I've been lured in with a £35, £40 a month contract. After 2 years, it leaps to £80 or something. And you say, oh, yes, of course, I'd forgotten that I'd signed up for a half-price deal. And then you think, oh, there's a better deal down the road with another company. You then try and leave. I had it recently when I moved home and I wanted to cancel everything. Oh, my God. The amount of times I was put on hold, the amount of times I had to explain things, the amount of times I then had to repeat things. And it is all about retaining the customer. But it isn't good customer service.
It's terrible customer service, and it's hard to believe that an organisation like Virgin Media were not aware that these practices would end up in exactly this situation. I mean, presumably when they come up with plans, they've got a legal department, or at the very least an HR department that would talk about whether this is legit.
Yeah, but the problem is the company's so huge. I mean, it's like something happening that nobody will probably know about. But when you incentivise call centre people to do their damnedest to keep you, then you have a problem, because they're not working on an annual salary, they're working on a retainer benefit. So if I lose 10 customers, then I'm really not doing very well for that particular company, and I could be out of a job. But if I'm actually bringing in, well, I've managed to get these folks back on course. But the one that is really infuriating is when they can't offer you what you actually want, and they will put you on hold. Or having explained, you've explained everything for 30 minutes, and then they cut you off. I've had it with an insurance company recently. I've actually had it with the Ombudsman, and I'm a great supporter of what the Ombudsman does. And 4 different people handled the claim, and on every occasion when I phoned back, they're no longer with the company. And I thought, I don't believe that for 1 minute. I just don't think they want to deal with this anymore. It's that Mills bloke again, you know.
It is I found myself congratulating the guy at Southeast Water about a year ago. We had a leak, and it took a little bit of working out where it was. Whose fault is it, theirs or ours? It's always ours, isn't it? It's never going to be theirs, unless it's within about 3 centimetres of a certain bit of space. Anyway, so I had to converse with them a couple of times, and I rang, and they were so helpful. They were so wonderful. I actually wanted to cry, and I thought, isn't it interesting that it's notable because it's unusual. Their customer service was so good, but it was good and stood out because it doesn't happen very often. How sad is that, Adrian?
Oh, my goodness me, you are so spot on. My TV and broadband provider, when I moved home, eventually I agreed a deal. They told me when I moved in it would take 3 days. 6 weeks later, I was still waiting to be connected to Wi-Fi. I played merry hell eventually, and this is the awful thing. I don't want to, you don't want to, people don't want to scream and shout and, you'd be accused of being abusive to the staff. Correct. No, I just want you to do the job you've been paid to do. And eventually, an absolute star of a girl came out, and she said, I'm working on a different company, but I've been brought in to sort out the problem. I've never dealt with a better person, and she sorted out 2 hours, and she said, you shouldn't have to be like this. Then, the next day, when it's going to be connected from my TV, a bloke turned up with a satellite dish. And I went, what's that? And he went, it's what you ordered. And I said, no, I'm not in a restaurant. No, absolutely it's not what I ordered. And he said, this is the problem. It's the call centres. They're all abroad, and they're on an incentive scheme. And he said, I've had eight people like this in the last 2 weeks that have been given the wrong things because they've signed up to this particular company. He said, I would get onto them and play hell. And I'm thinking, life is too short to spend your whole time complaining. And that's the problem. There's my mum, 96 years old. She goes, if only people did what they said they can do, but they never do.
Do you know, I can't believe I've forgotten this, but it was only when you mentioned the Wi-Fi thing. Years ago, 20-odd, do you remember Cable and Wireless, who were kind of the first they were going to set you up? Me and my then other half moved into a place, and the Cable and Wireless people said, yeah, coming round on Tuesday, mate. And Tuesday came around, nothing happened, and made a phone call. That took about God knows how long. And I remember even having to go to a phone box. I don't think I even had a mobile phone. There was a phone box near where I lived. Anyway, I'm telling this story to a mate of mine who happens to be a producer on Watchdog. Do you remember Watchdog, the proper...
I do indeed.
It was one of the very few proper consumer programmes on the telly, Adrian Mills. So it's... I'm obviously jesting. Nothing's ever going to beat you. Nothing's ever going to beat what you did.
So we rang Ian Collins.
So my mate said... She said, we're going to do a piece on this. And I went, what? She went, yeah, we'll do a piece on it. And I went, OK, that's fine. And then they came round, and because Watchdog used to make these things into, like, little films rather than just tell the story, I had to sort of act out, go into the phone box, putting some money in, and they sped up the film and made it all look, And in the meantime, the Cable and Wireless MD or whatever came to the flat where we lived, and he said... and he was like a desperate man, and he sat on the sofa and he went, we'll give you a year, mate. A year free. Don't do the interview. Don't. And I said, well, I said, we've filmed half of it already, like he cared, And anyway, it went out on a Monday night. There it was, little feature on Watchdog. I've never really thought about it for a long, long time. I don't know whether that's still online somewhere, but I mean, it just so happened what this industry is like. I just happened to know somebody, and that was her job at that point. So,
but isn't that terrible that you actually have to have the boss coming round to your house? My dad used to leave That's Life cards with my name on them lying around the house when workmen were in. But was with her once, I mean, and I got so infuriated with the company, and I thought, I can't bear this any longer. And I have never, ever traded on the fact that you work on the biggest consumer program ever. And then one day I said, look, I'm sorry, this has gone on for long enough. I want to tell you, my name is Adrian Mills. You know that already, but I'm a former journalist on BBC Television's That's Life. There was complete silence, and the voice came back, yeah, so what? Okay, you can't go anywhere after that.
Yeah, whereas the lovely Esther I can't imagine Esther had any bad customer service for the entirety of her life.
No. My car insurance, when I said I was an actor, they said, well, this is the cost because it goes up if you're an actor. Actors and musicians are nuns. What? And I said, well, why? And they said, well, for example, you might have a celebrity in your car as a passenger. They may get badly injured. And literally, I just joined that slide. And he said, imagine if Esther Ranson was in your car and she went through the windscreen. And I thought, he doesn't even know I'm working on the programme yet. And I went, yeah, that would be terrible, wouldn't it?
Well, do you know, yeah, I was just going to say on that point, Adrian, because I've always argued this case. I had a similar conversation, say, well, you work in radio, and well, you might know Kylie Minogue, and give her a lift home one night.
Yes.
And it was a very, and I thought, but what if you're, so if you're a nurse, as an example, and you're married to an A-list film star who will be driving the A-list film star around quite a lot, you don't get penalised for that.
No. But the whole insurance, in particular cars, is ludicrous. I remember doing a story where a guy had a fantastic car, not particularly special, but he painted red flames on the side of it. His insurance went up £600 when the insurance company saw a photograph of it, because in their mind it would go faster. It's lunacy.
Yeah.
You know, the whole world has gone slightly bonkers, hasn't it, really?
I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you another example here of, I don't know how many people will be on board with this one, but it happens in two distinct areas of life, and in this one happened to me quite recently. I get a message from a parcel delivery company say, a message from a parcel delivery company saying your order from, and it was something like, your order from Harsham Meadowcroft is on its way. And I thought, who the hell are Harsham Meadowcroft?
Yeah.
I'm Googling Harsham. I can't find anything about Harsham Meadowcroft. And on it goes. Turns out Harsham Meadowcroft, whoever it was, is simply another delivery company who facilitated the original delivery from one post to another, and then eventually it was given over to there was no... I was going mad thinking, who the hell could this be? I couldn't think of anything I'd ordered, and that's eventually what it turned out to be. And it happens on your bank statements as well, doesn't it? When you look at your bank statement and there's £35.50 been taken out by...
And you have no idea by who.
Margie Magrushi, and you think, who's Margie Magrushi? And you discover it's Margie Magrushi. Who is this person that's taken £35?
Phenomenal name.
Who's Margie? Who is this person? And you discover it's the local pizza restaurant, but it's owned by a bigger company called Margie Magrushi. That kind of stuff has got to stop, frankly.
Yeah, but also it's when you sign up for, say, you know, and we all know the companies that deliver most things that you can buy online, that if you click the wrong box, then you find yourself paying for a upgraded service, but you're paying £9.95 a month for it. And for about 6 months, I didn't really even notice it. And then I went, hang on a minute, what the hell is this £9.95? Then I realised I'd subscribed to an ongoing, renewable, monthly £9.95 just by fact of ticking a box, which I thought I was getting access to the rest of their website.
Yes.
So, to be honest, I mean, there's a law firm. Well, it's not a law firm. It's a website where if you Google them, you can ask them anything and you pay a one-off fee. It's a £5, and you think, wow, this is brilliant. You can do with matrimonial issues, you can do with car issues, insurance, lawyers, and you get access to a lawyer for literally that day, and you ask them the question, they answer it. What they don't tell you, because it's hidden away in their website, not at the front, that if you don't actually cancel your subscription within 3 days, you are then charged £50 a month. And I just went, I don't believe this. And I played merry hell, and eventually I got my 50 quid back. But it's because I probably said I'm a consumer journalist on talkTV, and they run scared of the media. They, you know, so... But they shouldn't. And Joe Public are left very, very vulnerable. They really are.
It's really quite extraordinary, isn't it, that we are in this place with... And trying to cancel something isn't the work of a moment. Again, I said just before you came on, Adrian, something I ended up subscribing to. It took me an evening to find where I cancelled on their website.
Yeah. Now, imagine if you're a very elderly, well, A little bit older than you are already. Nice, that's touche now.
Indeed.
And you know, my mum doesn't use the internet, you know, and she'd be in complete nightmare trying to deal with this sort of issue. And you just think, come on, guys, you know, just make it obvious, tell people up front what is going on, and then just deal. It doesn't cost a fortune. And if you do have a complaint, I would suggest you always write your complaint on Trustpilot, because something I didn't know is that before Trustpilot publish your complaint, they offer it up to the company for them to respond.
Wow.
And I recently had a car company contact me and said, oh, we're really sorry. We'll look after you next time you visit this particular garage. Would you mind taking that complaint down? And I said, no. I said, however, I will add to it and say you have responded.
That's brilliant. I didn't know that. I had no idea that that's what they did. But they're all up to it. And just one final point, as Damien, one of our producers in the office, pointed out, this one drives you mad. When you are ringing one of these customer service lines, the worst thing they can say to you is, because there's a recorded voice that takes you through about 4 hours of messages, one of which always includes, most of the problems can be solved by going to our website.
Yes.
No, they can't. That's why I'm ringing you. I couldn't find anything, and I don't want to talk to an automated machine that is going to kind of guess what my problem is, and my problem never falls within the criteria of the category. That's why I'm phoning you.
Yeah. Every time that happens, just keep saying, I want to speak to a human being, or retention centre. Just keep repeating those phrases, and eventually the machine kicks in and passes you on to, hopefully, a human being.
Love it. Adrian, always great to have you on. Thank you. Adrian Mills, consumer expert. Let me just bring you, by the way, Virgin Media's response to that incredible fine from Ofcom, £28 million. Virgin Media spokesman said it had completely redesigned its customer service in recent years and addressed the historic shortfalls through a number of improvements. They say our customer service turnaround strategy, underpinned by significant investment, has been transformational. Ofcom's latest data shows that Virgin Media is now the least complained about broadband provider, with complaints at record lows, and complaints specifically relating to difficulties leaving were 89% lower last year than in 2023, the spokesman added. Happy to read that out to clarify their current position. Right now, it's 10 to 4. We're going to go back to more of your calls and comments on the way in just a couple of moments. This is Talk.
The thing that most makes me angry about Keir Starmer talking about the need to defend our country, and he's gone out of his way to not make the tough decisions to actually do the thing to defend our nation. It's cowardly, and I think it's treacherous.
Nothing to say on immigration, nothing to say on benefits, nothing to say on jobs, nothing to say on tax. Absolutely appalling. If this is the solution the country's been waiting for, then we are in a very, very bad place.
People up and down the country are asking why they are always being put second. They work every day, they get up, they pay their bills, they look after their kids, and yet the other side of the social contract is not being held up.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
David in the Cotswolds says, if Reform said they won't stand in a Clacton by-election, will other parties who say they won't run then run? That would be odd, wouldn't it? Would that also be disturbing and hilarious in equal measure? As for the social contract, didn't the Tories sign net zero into law and now they're dead against it? Yep, the socialists of the contract is in tatters, says David. Yes, it was very much, was it Theresa May that bound us to certain emissions targets? There's nothing wrong with, nobody grumbles if you're going to try and reduce the amount of guff you chuck into the air. But you don't have to throw the entire kit at it and all the money that you've got left. I mean, these things can be done in different ways. We're not going to die. I mean, literally, we're not going to die. And yes, the planet heats up. The idea that it's because you're still driving your Ford Cortina around the M25, that's why the lesser spotted red newt of Bolivia no longer exists, is a nonsense. Just a quick reminder before I talk to Gareth in Derbyshire, you've probably noticed the World Cup 2026 is on. We're giving you a chance to win £26,000 in cold hard cash. It's tax-free. You can do a lot of stuff with 26,000 quid. It is a sizable chunk of money and it could be game-changing. I mean, I don't know, sort your mortgage out, take a proper holiday or just take the pressure off for a little bit. You want some details on it? This is how you can enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 83338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Good stuff. Before we speak to Kevin O'Sullivan, let's speak to Gareth in Derbyshire. What have you got for us, Gareth? Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. It's nice to speak to you.
You too. Fire away.
Oh, I was just trying to think, with Farage doing this funny business, as it's described.
Yes.
Because I think Kemi Badenoch accused him of playing games, but isn't she also playing games by sort of having this radical system of not standing in a by-election? Because it seems to me Conservatives always say they'll always put a candidate up, whatever the matter, but they've changed the policy. So,
well, they're arguing, aren't they? And Labour are doing the same thing, that this is not a legit by-election, so they're not going to endorse something that has only been introduced so that it helps Nigel Farage's career. That's their take on it.
Yeah, I know, but the thing is, if it is a by-election, it's a by-election, isn't it?
Whatever way it comes around, that's a fair point.
If it says by-election on it, that means you've got an opportunity to get a Member of Parliament elected.
Yep.
And if the Conservatives are backing away from that, I'm not sure if that sends the right message.
It's a fair point. It's a completely fair point. And, of course, there is talk of there being another by-election. Are you aware of that, Gareth?
What, in a different place?
No. So if there's the Clacton by-election, which could happen within a few weeks, then the Parliamentary Standards Committee says Nigel Farage was remiss in not booking in his, declaring, that's the word, his donations, and therefore he should be suspended from Parliament, and we insist there's a by-election. So that would mean that he has a by-election, wins the by-election, and then a couple of weeks after that there's another by-election.
Yeah, but, you can only play the game in front of you. England have got to play Norway on Saturday. They're not playing Argentina the following Tuesday or Wednesday, are they yet?
No.
They've got to play the next game, and that's it.
That's it, indeed. No, it's a fair point. Gareth, thank you, mate, for that. Great call. 0344 499 1000 is the number you'll need for Kevin O'Sullivan coming up. By the way, this parliamentary standards thing, how long does it take to decide whether somebody did or didn't break a rule? I mean, seriously, I cannot believe that couldn't be established, and you have to be fair to all parties in this, fair to the law of the land and what it says, and fair to Mr Farage. Surely, this is the problem with our system, isn't it? The cogwheels turn at such breathtakingly slow speed Simple. That would take an afternoon, wouldn't it? Take a few hours. Get the parliamentary standards people around the table and say, right, is it a breach or is it not a breach? Why do you need weeks or months to establish? You don't. It is or it isn't.